A terrifying horde of bloodthirsty monsters poured out of the spatial rift like an avalanche. People had to wage a brutal and continuous war for survival. And for So Do-jun, this nightmare became his only occupation. Looking back in South Korea, he remembered his old name. During those endless days, the boy mercilessly swung his sword for salvation. Thus, a whole month of harsh and grueling battles flew by unnoticed. Then a whole year of continuous slaughter with terrible creatures passed. Soon, even 10 years of this war flew by in the blink of an eye. With his trusty blade, the warrior completely forgot what human fear was. But suddenly, a gigantic and truly terrifying enemy appeared before him. The terrible lord arrogantly ordered the wounded warrior to surrender immediately. He immediately realized that the main culprit of the disaster stood before him. The monster offered the boy to spare his life and become his faithful sword. The enemy's impudent words only further angered the stubborn So Do-jun. With a furious battle cry, the knight rushed into his final attack. He swung the huge blade, putting all his remaining strength into the blow. The powerful attack hit the horned giant's strong armor straight on. But the Lord of Darkness only cried out in surprise at the unexpectedly strong rebuff. The demon gnashed his teeth in anger, realizing the full inhuman power of this man. However, the fearless hero was already rapidly entering the next deadly turn. The warrior's eyes flashed with a neon light of fury before the decisive, fatal collision. However, the giant monster seized the initiative in the battle with an incredibly fast strike. The ruler arrogantly called the boy's desperate attempts nothing more than pathetic fuss. With a pain-filled cry, the wounded hero staggered from the crushing blow. He was thrown far back, straight onto the ground, cracked by the heat, but the guy instantly regrouped and rushed back at full speed. He desperately moved towards rapprochement, despite the colossal difference in forces. The demonic lord merely loomed menacingly, shrouded in an ominous aura of pure destruction. With a terrifying roar, the monster mercilessly slammed the exhausted enemy straight into the lava. Completely exhausted, So Do-jun fell heavily to his knees in the midst of the fire. The triumphant Lord of Darkness arrogantly prepared to celebrate his final victory. A mysterious azure crystal pendant shone brightly on his muscular chest. Suddenly the guy narrowed his eyes fiercely, noticing this vulnerable detail. Gathering the last bits of his life force, he resolutely rushed at the monster. So Do-jun locked his blade tightly for one precise thrust. The sharp sword pierced space with lightning speed, rushing straight towards the cherished target. The warrior's powerful blow struck the shining artifact with precision. The stunned giant didn't even have time to react to this maneuver. The strong crystal shattered into pieces with a ringing sound from the furious pressure. The mutilated demon lord, in a rage, cursed the man who dared to go to the end. Completely exhausted, So Do-jun could barely keep his balance on his feet. The shattered azure artifact was finally deprived of its former magical energy. The monster howled hysterically from the realization that all his plans had failed. The spatial rift began to rapidly close, sucking the giant into the darkness. Breathing heavily, the boy lowered his bloody head with the last of his strength. His wounded body slowly dissolved in streams of mysterious light. The warrior's fading gaze captured only the closing eyes. As he died, he mentally admired the beautiful view of the distant starry sky. And then someone in simple flip-flops walked leisurely along the asphalt. Meanwhile, an ordinary black-haired guy was calmly walking along a modern street. A red warning light on the wall of the building suddenly began to blink and howl alarmingly. A system alert sounded, warning ordinary civilians to refrain from passing immediately. But So Do-jun ignored the warning right in the central district of Seoul. The guy stepped forward confidently and with a sweeping movement, preparing to overcome the invisible barrier. With a powerful roar, the space around him instantly became distorted with energy. The system blared a warning about the intrusion of an unregistered hero. Once on the other side, So Do-jun looked around menacingly and coldly. The dense green forest rustled all around, but the air and mana seemed familiar. He walked calmly across the grass, his simple rubber flip-flops slapping. Suddenly, an unfamiliar voice behind him loudly called out to the frozen guy. A group of heavily armed men politely asked if he was lost. The squad leader kindly offered to show the boy a safe route back out of the forest. So Do-jun just stared at the strangers silently and rather distantly. The red-haired girl dismissively noted that the stranger was dressed in a completely unheroic manner. The older man immediately realized that the man in front of them was clearly an ordinary assistant guy. Then his partner looked at So Do-jun's simple school backpack in surprise. The mercenaries immediately assumed that their cowardly comrades had abandoned the newcomer in the forest. Puzzled, So Do-jun just scratched the back of his head in surprise at such strange conclusions. The young fighter cried out joyfully and victoriously, having become convinced of his stupid guess. The experienced leader sighed, declaring that he understood perfectly well the motives of the young fools. The leader added that without a license and training, it is mortally dangerous to get involved in C rank. So Do-jun calmly replied that he didn't feel any particular gratitude towards them. The squad leader began to sweat profusely from the anger that welled up in him at such insolence. The hot-tempered partner immediately jerked forward, shouting an insult at the insolent man. But the leader ordered to leave the fool alone, since he did not appreciate the care. He added that this eccentric would quickly understand the harsh reality of the dangerous gate. Meanwhile, a colossal horned orc appeared in front of So-do-jun. The monster bared his teeth fiercely, staring at the fragile man frozen before him. The boy turned around lazily, still calmly holding his school backpack. And then he slowly closed his eyes, not showing a drop of fear at all. The huge orc swung for the killing blow, intending to crush the guy. At that moment, So-do-jun remembered his 10 years of brutal war. Suddenly, the guy made a lightning-fast dash, dodging the heavy axe. The ferocious creature didn't even have time to understand where its opponent had gone. The former knight's eyes flashed ominously with the pure golden flame of primal fury. So-do-jun delivered a crushing blow with his bare hand, piercing the monster through and through. The headless body of a huge orc lay frozen in the middle of a sunlit clearing. With a dull thud, the monster's carcass fell into a pool of its own blood. The guy coldly stated that the creatures here were no different from the previous ones. Shrouded in an ominous dark aura, he calmly moved further into the forest. He slowly reached out to the curved trophy weapon lying on the ground. So-do-jun confidently lifted the massive cleaver, assessing its strength and balance. The guy calmly remembered that before he wouldn't have even looked at such a trifle. Running his finger along the sharp blade, he caused the orc's scarlet blood to gush out. Thick, dark blood splashed like a powerful fountain onto the trampled green grass. Then So-do-jun began to search the fallen carcass for valuables. A rare magic stone extracted from a monster began to sparkle brightly in the warrior's palm. The sparkling red crystal shimmered in his bloodied fingers against the sunset. Without thinking twice, the guy casually shoved the valuable trophy straight into his backpack. Having finished collecting the loot, he continued his leisurely search in the middle of the endless dense forest. The guy with a fierce amber gaze instantly noticed the suspicious rustling sound. From the depths of the forest came the heavy, earth-shaking footsteps of the enemy. A whole gang of ferocious orcs was advancing on him from the thicket in an organized manner. The main monster bloodthirstily swung his huge axe for a fatal blow. Meanwhile, the hero coldly clutched the ominous red crystal in his hand. Suddenly, the guy made a mad lunge and attacked the monster with lightning speed. The huge orc fell to the ground with a crash, choking on his own blood. The remaining creatures froze in panic, stunned by such a savage and sudden massacre. And then the fighter calmly turned around, without losing his composure for a second. And an armed group was already moving purposefully towards him along the forest path. The red-haired girl remembered with disbelief that strange fool in ordinary slippers. The comrade immediately asked if she was really that worried about the stranger. Meanwhile, the squad leader sternly reminded the intruder about his illegal entry into the gate, and elite special agents in suits were already rushing from the control center to intercept them. The local Namsan gate was a serious C rank, requiring professional intervention. Hyun Nim confidently stated that this guy would definitely survive in the forest. But the huge orc shook with wild fear, expecting quick rescue. Suddenly, the main character's powerful fist pierced the monster's ferocious face. The boy quickly dodged while the other giant swung his cleaver furiously. The huge blade smashed the rocky ground into pieces with a deafening roar. The third monster froze in fear, noticing out of the corner of his eye the enemy's rapid approach. Suddenly, the guy soared high into the sky for a powerful kick. The guy slammed his slipper into the huge monster's head with a spin. Another fallen orc collapsed dead in a pool of his own blood. And then the fighter calmly picked up the trophy blade straight from the ground. But he still lacked valuable magic stones. Meanwhile, the clear sky above the danger zone remained serenely blue. Our hero confidently adjusted his noticeably heavier black backpack. The guy noted with dissatisfaction the meager harvest of low-ranking magic stones. An agent in a suit suddenly rushed in and loudly ordered him to come here. The guy slowly turned around at the shout, clearly not expecting such impudence. A whole group of stern-looking operatives in sunglasses stood menacingly in front of him. The commander sternly introduced himself as an employee of the center and demanded to see the hero's registration. However, the fighter only lazily clarified whether this was really the local control center. The senior agent became visibly unnerved by such blatant and cold disrespect. And then the guy's amber eyes flashed furiously from under his black bangs. The hero boldly snapped that these annoying people were starting to bother him a lot. The enraged commander immediately ordered his subordinates to get heavy steel handcuffs. The operatives threatened to use force if the offender refused to cooperate voluntarily. Suddenly, one of the agents grabbed the guy's arm with a death grip. The fair-haired agent warned that if the guy resisted, it would be his own fault. Meanwhile, the fighter didn't even move, completely ignoring the operative's threats. And then the blonde suddenly froze, feeling an unbelievable bone-chilling horror. The guy ordered the uninvited guests to leave immediately in an icy tone. The other operatives hissed angrily and simultaneously reached for their formidable weapons. Suddenly, with a whistle, they revealed special sealing magic blades. Such a high-tech, fourth-level device could easily subdue even strong orcs. However, with a slight movement of his hand, the guy twisted the blonde's wrist with a terrible crunch. Then came a dark, threatening final warning from the protagonist. The fighter ominously advised the special agents to return back to avoid truly serious consequences. The angry fighter exhaled loudly, ready to teach the insolent ones a crushing lesson. The two special agents rushed forward furiously, swinging their batons, but the guy easily dodged, looking arrogantly at the powerless attacks of his opponents. With one sharp and lashing movement of his hand, he intercepted the stranger's weapon. With a powerful kick to the stomach, the guy completely blocked the second attacker. Suddenly the hero soared into the air, delivering crushing kicks left and right. Another agent was thrown back in disgrace, completely shattered into pieces. Meanwhile, the frightened commander helplessly watched the instantaneous fall of his detachment. The beaten special agent only wheezed heavily, writhing on the ground in unbearable pain. Suddenly, the guy turned away indifferently, losing all interest in this pathetic brawl. The silhouette of the invincible guy instantly blurred, turning into a barely perceptible shadow. The commander, terrified to death, was shocked to realize that the impudent intruder had disappeared without a trace. Suddenly, the fighter silently materialized right behind the broad back of the stunned special agent. The beaten opponent fell to his knees, coughing heavily and violently from pain. The defeated operative stared at his adamant opponent in fear and confusion. And then the guy calmly asked if the agents would now follow him everywhere. The fighter added sternly, was it really just his unauthorized entry? The commander quickly explained that unregistered heroes always receive automatic notifications. Meanwhile, the guy clarified whether the official heroes had any problems then. Suddenly, an icy voice made the special agent flinch at the question about fault zones. The rift zones were terrifying passages from which monsters flooded the entire planet. Humanity has long used the valuable artifacts found there as a powerful energy resource. The commander shouted furiously that the Hero Association would never tolerate arbitrary action. The offender only lazily inquired what he should do in this situation. The stunned special agent mentally cursed this truly crazy and dangerous psycho. Suddenly, the guy struck the commander with lightning speed, delivering a crushing blow right to the face. The poor guy flew back with a whistle, completely losing all control. The fighter thought indifferently that he had done absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. The enraged operative shouted insults at the departing hero with all his might, and the guy calmly walked away, accompanied by furious promises to shoot him next time. The magical protective barrier shattered into thousands of sparkling tiny fragments. A wild, deafening cry from the monster, full of rage and deep despair, was heard. Losing consciousness, the wounded warrior felt himself being inexorably sucked into the void. Floating in the endless starry space, the fading fighter finally prepared for death. Suddenly the young man, immersed in darkness, slowly closed his tired eyes. But a moment later his turquoise eyes widened in surprise. An unknown knight in golden armor suddenly found himself hanging upside down. Right before him, in the pure heavenly palace, stood a mysterious stranger. The amazed boy with amber eyes quietly introduced himself as Seo Do-jun. The dying warrior promised to disappear, but received an immediate, harsh refusal in response. The knight in golden armor looked sadly at his new silent interlocutor. The guy with the amber gaze froze in confusion, listening attentively to the stranger's words. The exhausted warrior resignedly admitted that he no longer had any attachment to life. Meanwhile, he remembered his destroyed homeland, the death of loved ones, and the betrayal of a comrade. The knight sincerely did not understand the meaning of such an unbearably hard life. And then he assumed that everything was exactly the same with Seo Do-jun. But the boy objected, admitting his desire to protect his grandmother and Yoon Young. The mysterious warrior sighed heavily, surprised by such a simple and pure human answer. And then he asked the guy directly with a smile what he really wanted. Seo Do-jun confidently pressed his hand to his chest, ready to voice his cherished wish. The action moved to Seoul, specifically to the bustling Gyeongseon district. The number of exchangers for artifacts from the gates here has long since exceeded IT companies. The main character walked calmly down the street, catching the glances of passers-by, and then he noticed a bright sign for a buyer of magic stones. At the reception, the guy was met by a tattooed employee who greeted him politely. The hunter confidently declared his desire to sell several magic stones. Then he simply dumped a pile of stones from his backpack onto the table. The receiver was stunned by what he saw, mentally lamenting the amount of blood on them. Having come to his senses, the employee suggested that the client wait for the estimate and have a cup of coffee. As a result, the brunette leisurely sipped the drink while the guy diligently washed the goods. The appraiser carefully counted all the goods, announcing the office's 40% commission. The sly man coquettishly named the final amount to be paid in won. However, the hunter sharply rebuked him, outraged by the buyer's exorbitant interest rate. The manager just grinned sarcastically, calling their conditions the best in the city. The guy didn't argue and silently raked his stones back. Suddenly, the impudent businessman roughly grabbed the departing guest by the arm. He brazenly demanded payment for the insidiously imposed assessment and coffee. In response, the brunette boldly suggested that the extortionist try to take the money by force. Then the merchant grinned ominously, threatening the C-rank heroes standing behind them. And at that very moment, the guy's path was blocked by huge thugs. The arriving mercenaries asked with displeasure who dared to show off here. The hunter only glared angrily, instantly assessing the situation. The leader of the bandits didn't even have time to react to the threat. The frightened appraiser trembled with fear, realizing the strength of the guest. The brunette slammed the huge brute right into the counter with a powerful blow. The beaten bandit fell to the floor, wheezing from unbearable pain. The entire gang of extortionists was instantly thrown to the ground. The hunter calmly walked back to the frightened manager. The merchant, gray-haired with horror, immediately reduced the commission to 1%. The protagonist smiled ominously, finally suggesting that they move on to a fair deal. The hunter left the exchange office, promising to definitely come back here again. And then a thick wad of honestly earned money lay in front of the surprised relatives. The elderly woman and the little girl were literally speechless with shock. Dujun's grandmother asked with a trembling voice where such wealth came from. The guy sat down on the floor and began to make up a story about a successful businessman friend. The old woman asked with obvious doubt whether he really had such a friend. The brunette just smiled slyly, reminding her of the place where he grew up. The elderly woman sighed with relief, finally believing this story. The red-haired little girl jumped up and down with joy, asking excitedly if they were rich now. The hunter gently hugged his little sister on the head, confirming her guess with a smile. The little girl began to jump joyfully around the room, celebrating her sudden wealth. My little sister was twirling around happily, not hiding her sincere childish delight. Suddenly, the boy remembered his past life and his sincere dying request. The real owner of the body only begged for protection for his beloved family. The hero looked closely at his new reflection in the window glass. It turned out that after waking up, he finally became that same Seo Do-jun. The safest house in the country cost a huge amount of money, which was not yet enough. However, the guy was determined to regain his former power and earn billions. The local monsters and rifts seemed like a mere trifle to him compared to the past. For the former sword god, this formidable world became an ordinary playground. However, the guy hasn't regained even a tenth of his strength yet. Suddenly, a loud and brazen cry from the street interrupted the family idyll. Dujong calmly told his family to stay at home and went to greet the guests. He slowly crossed the threshold of his home, ready for any trouble. Two suspicious and extremely arrogant guys were already waiting for the guy at the door. The vile moneylender sarcastically reminded him of his colossal debt of 48 million. It turned out that these extortionists had increased the old debt for the grandmother's treatment by as much as tenfold. The bandits brazenly declared that they would take away all the money earned at the gates. The greedy blonde grinned vilely, swinging his arm to strike, talking about business. But the hunter reacted instantly, knocking out the red-haired brute with a crushing hook. The remaining collector froze in horror, not believing his eyes. The frightened blonde screamed in confusion at such a sudden turn of events. Dujong loomed over him menacingly, declaring the moneylenders his debtors. The trembling bandit asked fearfully if it was really the same guy in front of him. The hunter clenched his fist, promising to pay their boss a personal visit soon. After some time, the action moved under the peaceful blue sky of Seoul. Dujong went to the shopping mall with his little sister. Rows of beautiful teddy bears greeted them on the store shelves. The little girl excitedly asked if she really could buy a new toy. The guy confirmed this with a smile, allowing him to choose absolutely everything he needed. The boy inherited all the memories of the body's previous owner, which noticeably revived his frosty heart. Meanwhile, Yoon Young was mesmerized by the bright display cases with teddy bears. The previous Seo Do-jun was always incredibly kind to his half-sister, and now the former sword god sincerely wanted to protect this innocent child's soul. The girl modestly held out a small hair, quietly asking if she could take that one. The little girl carefully hugged the tiny white toy, not daring to ask for more, but her brother suddenly snatched a huge teddy bear from the shelf and thrust it straight into her arms. The hunter smiled kindly, repeating his permission to choose whatever she wanted. The happy little sister broke into a wide smile, closing her eyes from the joy that overwhelmed her. Then came a sumptuous lunch of hearty ramen, a burger, and fries. The couple ate their lunch at a table in the food court, enjoying the quiet moment. Suddenly their peace was interrupted by someone's surprised exclamations behind them. An arrogant blonde woman, accompanied by bodyguards, suddenly approached Seo Do-jun. The woman grinned slyly, looking disdainfully at the guy's simple clothes and surroundings. Then she rudely turned the subject to his mother, starting to openly mock him. The hunter only frowned furiously, barely containing the anger boiling inside him. Little Yun Young froze in fear, chewing her burger and wondering who this ant was. However, the guy quickly controlled his emotions, hiding his face behind a sinister grin. The stranger continued to smile triumphantly, clearly not expecting a quick and harsh rebuff. The frightened little sister looked at the guest in confusion, continuing to clutch her lunch tightly. The brazen blonde looked down at the child, rudely asking her name. The girl quietly gave her name, immediately receiving a portion of insults directed at her mother. The woman continued to mock sarcastically, looking haughtily at the silent So Do-jun. Noticing his deathly silence, the haughty guest mockingly inquired about the reason for his calm. The hunter continued to sit with his back to her, stubbornly ignoring any attacks from this person. Then the angry blonde turned her attention to the little girl, calling her a little brat. She smiled nastily, about to utter the dirtiest and most offensive curse word out loud. The guy's eyes flashed angrily when she started talking about the slut. Suddenly, Du-jong turned around sharply, calling the guest an ugly bitch and an orc. The blonde was momentarily speechless from such an unexpected and harsh insult. The guy's gaze was like lightning, revealing his inner fire. So Du-jun grew up as an illegitimate son, experiencing a lot of poverty and orphanhood. For 10 years he suffered humiliation in his new family, becoming superfluous there. He was eventually kicked out and forced to go live with his grandmother and newfound sister. Du-jun's past was dark, but he stood firm against the blows of fate. The unknown voice was sincerely amazed at how his tormented heart had endured everything. And then he firmly decided that from now on, everything would change dramatically. The guy harshly reminded the blonde of their 12 years of disgusting life together. He mercilessly added that not only did she have a brick face, but she also had a nasty character. Suddenly, the stunned guards revealed that he simply had a monstrous inferiority complex. Du-jun noted that the blonde had no reason to be superior to his sister. Those around him witnessed how the guy fiercely defended his family. The opponent was literally speechless from such harsh words. She seethed with rage, angrily asking him what he had just said. Suddenly, a refined and stately woman appeared in the hall. The blonde immediately ran to her with a piercing scream, "Mom!" In tears, she began to complain about what this scoundrel had said. However, her mother cut her off harshly, ordering her to calm down immediately. Then the stepmother put on a fake smile and asked Du-jun how he was doing. The guy mentally christened her a lying witch who had tormented him for 12 years. Suddenly, the stepmother began to sing in a pretentious tone about how much her father was worried. Du-jong abruptly cut off the dialogue by saying that they were nothing to each other. Then the guy harshly threw an order in her face to get out of here. The woman was literally frozen in place by such unheard-of audacity. Turning proudly, she silently walked away under the stunned gaze of the guards. Meanwhile, she bitterly remembered the submissive Do-jun from the past. The offended blonde rushed to catch up with her mother, shouting to wait for her. Finally, Du-jun was able to breathe a sigh of relief and turn to his sister. An inner voice concluded that the former silent weakling no longer existed. To top it off, there was a warning that the stepmother had better realize this quickly. A snow-white business-class sedan sped along the night highway at great speed. Inside the salon, the blonde was completely hysterical, demanding that the insolent bastard be crushed immediately. She continued to gesticulate furiously, trying to find out from her mother the reason for such a retreat. Suddenly, the stepmother asked in an icy tone why Du-jun was even alive. The frightened subordinate turned around timidly, assuring him that the previous order had been successfully carried out. However, the woman screamed in rage that for some reason this dead man was still breathing. The manager hastened to apologize, but the blonde was stunned by what she heard. The haughty stepmother only turned gloomily to the window, ignoring the silent scene. The shocked daughter did not calm down, demanding at least some kind of explanation from her mother. She ended up directly accusing her mother of attempting to murder Du-jun in cold blood. The stepmother suddenly asked her daughter ironically if she really liked him. The frightened blonde screamed shrilly that everything was not like that at all. Suddenly, the woman clamped her daughter's mouth shut with her strong hand. With a mad gleam in her eyes, her mother ordered her not to interfere. The daughter shook with wild primal fear, not daring to move, and the car sped away into the distance, while the stepmother cursed the guy for his rudeness. In a rage, she firmly promised to get rid of the bastard at any cost. Meanwhile, 10 years ago, fault zones appeared on Earth. From there, terrible monsters poured out and began to mercilessly exterminate the frightened people. At that fateful moment, the entire familiar world plunged into chaos. However, thanks to the sudden appearance of brave heroes, the creatures were quickly subdued. People learned to extract valuable magical stones from defeated monsters. Du-jong rode thoughtfully in the taxi, thinking about the new energy industry. And then the car's wheels suddenly braked, producing a loud squeal. The guy went out into the street, realizing that to earn money, he had to be a hero. Soon he confidently approached the nondescript building of the local financial office. With a firm step, Do-jun headed straight into this gloomy room. The sounds of his heavy footsteps echoed up the dirty stairs. A gloomy man sat in the office, puffing on a strong cigarette smoke. The main bandit immediately rudely asked what the hell the bastard wanted here. The bandit angrily put out his cigarette, reminding the guy of the beating of his guys. Du-jong sat down in the chair, with a relaxed air, not at all afraid of the threats. The leader was genuinely surprised by such impudence and daring behavior of the uninvited guest. He was mentally amazed at the changes in the easygoing guy who had given his accomplices a hard time. Meanwhile, the bandit quickly realized that Do-jun had experienced an awakening. He loomed over him menacingly, mocking his recent awakened status. At the boss's signal, a gang of tough guys instantly surrounded the guy from all sides. The huge brute stood right in front of Do-jun, demonstrating his crushing power. The leader added dismissively that he often broke arrogant D-rank newcomers. Finally, he promised to give the upstart a clear and very harsh demonstration of force. Du-jong only remained coldly silent, his whole appearance showing absolute indifference. The bandit in glasses languidly ordered the obstinate guest to sit down. However, the guy abruptly cut him off, saying that he was far from finished speaking. The angry leader jumped up in rage, calling him an insolent brat. And then he suddenly reached for his glasses, ready to personally punish the upstart. Suddenly, Do-jun struck him in the face with a lightning-fast and powerful blow. With a wild roar, the gang leader flew backwards onto the floor. Flying past his subordinates, he stunned them with his shameful defeat. The guy calmly added that he was well aware of their criminal fraud with documents. With a devastating uppercut, Do-jun explained that he needed a fake hero ID. One of the remaining bandits attempted to attack Do-jun with a powerful blow from above. The guy dodged masterfully, and the thug's fist whistled through the air. With a lightning-fast counter-move, Do-jun seized the initiative in the fight. In a matter of seconds, the entire gang of thugs was thrown to the floor. Do-jong demanded that a perfect document be produced for him immediately, without any unnecessary problems. Finally, he added in an icy tone that the deadline was tomorrow. The leader's accomplice froze in fear, covered in cold sweat from wild fear. The second bandit also froze, not even daring to breathe in front of the monster. The defeated leader panicked and realized that the person in front of him was an awakened B rank. The very nervous, bespectacled man began to nod frantically, obediently agreeing to fulfill all the conditions. And then Do-jun suddenly brought his heavy hand down on the bandit's shoulder. The boy's gaze flashed ominously as he asked directly about his stepmother's order. The arrogant image of the insidious blonde immediately flashed before the frightened man's eyes. He felt the death grip on his shoulder tighten even more. Unable to withstand the terrible pressure, the bespectacled man screamed in panic throughout the entire office. The leader admitted that Hong Hee-ju ordered him to finish off Do-jun with debts. The man howled hysterically that he had been literally forced to drive the guy to suicide. Do-jong listened to these screams with an absolutely cold, indifferent expression on his face. And then the guy asked harshly if it was this bastard who locked him in. The frightened bandit shook his whole body, frantically insisting that he knew nothing. He swore that he was telling the pure truth and wished only the best for the boy. The interlocutor only listened thoughtfully to this babble, propping his chin up with his hand. And then he calmly said the name of a certain Kang Cheol-woo. The brunette ordered to obtain all the information about this man by tomorrow. After the harsh order, the guy silently turned around and resolutely headed for the exit. Stepping outside, he looked thoughtfully at the clear daytime sky. An important request to protect Grandma and Yoon-young came to his mind. And then he firmly promised himself to personally sort all this out. The guy confidently pulled his official B-rank license out of his pocket. Suddenly, he resolutely placed the electronic card on the scanning terminal. The system immediately confirmed the hero's registration, but warned about his low rank. And then he mentally called the person who gave out the card a bastard. The terminal continued to beep persistently as the brunette entered the danger zone. The hero confidently crossed the threshold of the mysterious and gloomy gate called Bamsum. He walked slowly forward along the narrow, long, and dark tunnel. Solo completion of this dungeon was considered extremely difficult for ordinary fighters. A barely noticeable, but very predatory grin flashed across his face. A huge, poisonous green snake suddenly jumped out of the darkness at him. But the guy just thought happily that this was exactly what he liked. The enraged monsters, with a wild roar, rushed into their final attack. The guy dodged with lightning speed, and the monster's huge fang flew past. Suddenly the snake hissed furiously, spraying dangerous green mucus around. The brunette immediately recognized the monster as a deadly and extremely dangerous viper. He deftly pushed off from the stone wall of the tunnel, performing a flawless somersault. And then the guy suddenly braked, landing on both feet. At that very moment he struck a crushing blow that shattered everything. Dark blood of the defeated and cut-in-half monster gushed around. The hunter sighed with relief and wearily lowered his powerful armored arm. He was quite pleased to note that the equipment was definitely worth the money spent. Meanwhile, his gaze suddenly turned somewhere deep into the tunnel. Several more angry snakes jumped out of the darkness at the guy. The hunter reacted instantly and mercilessly grabbed one viper by the head. With a powerful movement, he furiously crushed the scaly creature straight into the ground. Thick clouds of toxic black smoke swirled ominously in the air. The monster's slime slowly flowed down the cold stone walls in toxic drops. The guy stood calmly in the middle of this chaos, surrounded by defeated enemies. Then he coldly sank his claws into the lifeless carcass of the monster. To his great disappointment, there were no valuable magical stones inside. The guy lazily dragged the bag further, thinking about the extremely low probability of a drop. The hunter confidently walked towards the exit, realizing the need to clear out a couple hundred more creatures. A hideous cracked skull suddenly appeared out of the darkness, poking out at the hunter. Meanwhile, the guy joyfully realized that he finally had a way out. Suddenly, a giant snake with glowing eyes blocked his path, and then he lazily threw his heavy bag on the ground. The brunette quickly rushed forward, jumping high up towards the ceiling. However, the next second the guy suddenly froze from an unexpected blow. He thought angrily that he needed to get this all over with as quickly as possible. The enemy swung, intending to deal the hunter a powerful and crushing blow. There was a deafening roar from the collision of two incredibly strong opponents. The powerful blast wave instantly cracked the stone wall behind the guy. The huge snake opened its mouth furiously, preparing to swallow the daring hunter in an instant. However, the guy deftly twisted in the air, dodging the deadly attack. He landed hard on his feet, leaving deep marks on the ground. The hunter quickly regrouped and rushed into his new furious attack. The guy delivered a powerful punch straight into the durable purple scales. A sudden flash of surprise at the collision flashed across his eyes. The brunette realized that normal physical attacks did not harm this monster at all. He began to feverishly think about how to regain his former crushing strength. Suddenly the guy turned around sharply, noticing something important out of the corner of his eye. On the ground lay a fragment of an old sword, which greatly intrigued the hero. A mad and very dangerous determination instantly flashed in his eyes. The hunter cold-bloodedly decided that he simply had no other choice now. The guy confidently took a firm step forward, tightly gripping the rusty blade. A huge golden snake quickly began to spin its coils around the daring hero. The hunter pushed off the ground sharply, deciding to borrow this strength for a while. He made an incredibly beautiful and lightning-fast jump into the very center of chaos. The guy furiously promised to personally tear this vile creature to pieces. The next moment he adjusted his grip on the hilt of his old sword. The monster responded with a deafening, ferocious, and furious roar. And then the brunette dealt his first crushing blow to the enemy. With one furious and powerful swing, he completely severed the giant creature's head. Small fragments of rusty weapons flew in all directions with a quiet ringing sound. And then the guy looked with relief at the remaining stub in his hand. The hunter walked slowly away, leaving behind the lifeless carcass of the defeated monster. He looked at the fragment critically, considering it too short for a good longsword. The brunette decided that the local earnings clearly exceeded all his previous income. The hunter slowly walked outside when the full moon had already risen over the base. The boy clenched his fist tightly, making regaining his former strength his top priority. He was sincerely glad that his old comrades did not see him like this. Meanwhile, on the street, he was suddenly met by a funny yellow cat. The buyer happily poured a pile of red magic stones from his bag onto the counter. He calmly announced that he would take the usual 40% commission. The hunter was dissatisfied with the high price and timidly asked the buyer for a discount. He simply reminded that they offer the most favorable conditions without unnecessary taxes. The merchant confidently placed a thick wad of money directly on the clean white table. Sighing, the brunette silently took the amount of cash owed to him. Then the buyer stared in surprise at the badly beaten face of his young assistant. The guy started complaining about a crazy psycho who beat up all the local security. The man began to lecture his interlocutor, discussing the importance of real combat skills. The beaten guy irritably asked the merchant to stop these stupid moralizing lectures. The buyer laughed cheerfully and kindly invited the guy to call at any time. He silently turned around and slowly walked towards the exit of the room. But the suddenly departing brunette attracted the close attention of the frightened, beaten guy. The beaten poor fellow stared at his retreating back with fear and anger. Suddenly he screamed furiously, pointing his finger at his offender. The merchant was very surprised that this handsome young man had caused the recent pogrom. And then the buyer loomed menacingly over the hero, accusing him of beating civilians. The assistant grinned ominously, calling his boss a 7-year veteran. However, the brunette calmly ordered them to get lost and mind their own business. The experienced merchant's face instantly twisted with anger at such unheard-of insolence. The beaten guy grinned maliciously, clearly planning some kind of daring mischief. The dark-haired swordsman calmly asked if he wanted to avenge him. The man in the bandana clenched his fist angrily and called his opponent a son of a bitch. The experienced fighter remembered that heroes most often die in fights with each other. Then the mercenary hastened to leave, citing his urgent business. The brunette stared silently at the frightened boy with a bandage on his nose. And then he sternly asked if he had many complaints. Suddenly, the swordsman abruptly threw a sack with a sparkling load at the guy. At the same time, he dryly ordered the stunned poor fellow to simply count the loot. The guy was stunned by the sight of high-level magic stones, not understanding its power. The employee's trembling fingers began to tap the buttons of the white calculator. In the end, he calculated the insane sum of 150 million won. The swordsman was surprised by such a small profit for a whole day of hard hunting. The young man hinted at the deduction of a commission, frightened by the guest's suddenly darkened gaze. The hunter grinned condescendingly and agreed to a paltry 1% commission. The manager mentally panicked because the actual rate was a full 40%. With bated breath, he timidly reminded them of the need for management permission. The brunette gloomily ordered him to immediately get this damned consent from the boss. Meanwhile, the frightened young man was already reporting the situation to his boss in a trembling voice. And then the swordsman unceremoniously snatched the phone from him, demanding that he bring money. The boss on the phone understood everything and asked to return the smartphone to the frightened employee. Instead, the swordsman cold-bloodedly threw the alien gadget straight at the wall. He then ominously ordered the speechless manager to quickly hand over the cash. The boy obediently placed heavy bags with wads of money on the counter. The hunter left, wishing them to continue collaborating without any unnecessary problems. 10 minutes later, the confident click of an opening door was heard in the office. The boss burst in and shouted furiously, asking why his subordinate had taken so long to respond. The poor guy, with tears in his eyes, timidly announced his resignation. He finally broke down, pointing to the shattered telephone in the wall. And then the shocked boss stared silently at the scale of the destruction that had been caused. And then the guy who was leaving turned around in fear at the strange sound from the street. It turned out that the boss was already busy calling a certain Hunju Yan on the phone. Meanwhile, the mysterious girl with purple hair walked confidently along the sidewalk. Her elegant black shoes clicked loudly and rhythmically on the stone tiles. Passers-by immediately began to whisper, recognizing her as a famous person. The stylish lady in glasses smiled predatorily, anticipating an interesting meeting. Suddenly she approached the sign of that very stone store. The bell on the door rang softly, welcoming the new important guest. The manager screamed wildly in shock as he recognized the legendary Hunju Yan who had entered. And then the beauty coquettishly raised her glasses, confirming her loud personality. The worker remembered that the guest was the boss's niece and the 4th S rank in Korea. The girl lazily clarified that her uncle was suffering because of the impudent hero without a commission, and then she sat down leisurely, demanding to know all the details of the brazen raid. Meanwhile, a very strange company had gathered in the quiet traditional courtyard. The muscular swordsman stood shirtless, while his companions chatted peacefully on the veranda. He thought gloomily that the 100 million he had earned was too slow a pace. The hunter decided it was time to move on to solo clearing of S-rank gates. To implement the plan, he needed to immediately regain his former power. Suddenly he remembered the previous world, because the mana here is negligible. Besides, good equipment in this place cost a fortune. Suddenly, Dujong became very wary, feeling a strange, frightening vibration on his face. A little girl in the courtyard froze in fear and dropped her toy rabbit. Suddenly the guy rushed towards her, ordering Yoon-young to run home. The half-naked swordsman instantly picked up the frightened little girl in his arms in front of the door. An elderly woman ran out to meet him and excitedly asked the guy what had happened. And then the whole house shook from a powerful, frightening underground shock. The shocked girl, in panic, hugged her protector tightly around the neck. The guy with a furious gleam in his eyes immediately understood the cause of the cataclysm. A huge, crushing spatial rift opened ominously directly above the residential building. Dujong sternly ordered his frightened relatives to stay inside, as it was dangerous outside. A powerful burst of energy erupted as Do-jun prepared for battle. Meanwhile, in Seoul, the huge building of the Heroes Association stood majestically. Inside the headquarters, the group leader suddenly received a message about the discovery of a rift. The analysts at their computers panicked, as so little time had passed since the last incident. The commander shouted furiously, ordering immediate contact with the White Lion Guild. Then he anxiously asked his subordinates the exact location of the dangerous anomaly. Having learned about the residential building, the chief grabbed his head in horror. He realized grimly that the death of an ordinary person inside the rift would block the entrance. Then waves of bloodthirsty monsters will attack the city unhindered for days on end. In such a dire scenario, the whole of Seoul will inevitably turn into a living hell. The fair-haired analyst reported to the boss that the person who entered was named So Do-jun. Then he added, confused, that the boy ran to save his younger sister. And then a catastrophic forecast of the probability of waves appeared on the screen. The entire association operating room was plunged into an ominous, gloomy silence. Meanwhile, in another office, someone's hand furiously through documents. The blonde girl angrily asked what Do-jun's awakening meant. The bald manager confirmed with fear that he had definitely woken up last time. The man swallowed hard as he listened to the angry curses directed at Kang Cheol-woo. The enraged blonde slammed her fist with all her might right on the wooden table. Suddenly, she rapaciously ordered that the bastard be given the order to immediately kill the target. The bald manager reported in confusion that a new fault had appeared in Do-jun's house. He added that the media will soon be trumpeting this terrible news. And then the blonde calmly clarified whether this meant the guy's final death. Obviously, the predatory gaze of the office's owner did not promise anything good for the poor fellow. She then dryly ordered that close observation be continued until full confirmation. Meanwhile, Do-jun confidently stepped onto the unfamiliar ground with his bare feet. The hunter suddenly found himself in the middle of an endless, sunlit, dense forest. The muscular guy froze in amazement, completely unable to believe his own eyes. It turned out that this was the same native forest where he walked as a child. The atmosphere here, rich in powerful mana, was absolutely identical to his previous world. The guy suggested that there was an exit at the end of this forest path, and then a confident, anticipatory grin appeared on his face. Meanwhile, ahead, the huge luminous world tree rose majestically. Streams of purest mana flowed from the ancient branches of the sacred giant. Do-jung remembered that it was the burning of this spring that destroyed the homeland. The hunter sat down by the rock, rejoicing at the incredible integrity of the ancient tree. Suddenly the guy realized that he could bring back the colossal power of the past. At that very moment, his body was enveloped in a powerful, blinding blue glow. Filled with pure energy, the muscular swordsman laughed quietly and contentedly, and then he calmly closed his eyes, completely immersing himself in the process of meditation. The boy meditated motionless inside the world tree for 1 day, 2, 3 days. Forgetting about food and water, he concentrated on breathing for 10 whole days. The calm silence of the night was broken by someone's heavy, ominous exhalation from the forest thicket. And then the guy suddenly opened his eyes, sensing a foreign, deadly presence. From the darkness, the disgusting monsters of Vulcan began to crawl out with a terrible cackle. Meanwhile, the hero immediately recognized the scum who had once burned the great tree. The creatures rushed towards the warrior meditating at the heights with wild cries. He thought that a sword with a water attribute would be very useful right now. The impudent monsters were already prepared to tear apart their seemingly defenseless victim. However, the boy furiously released mana, promising to crush all enemies into pieces. The warrior's hand was instantly covered in powerful flashes of pure azure energy. He swung his arm sharply, preparing to unleash the power he had accumulated over 10 days. And then one of the monsters opened its toothy mouth in horror. The guy focused his aim on the crowd of creatures attacking him. The ferocious predator of Vulcan backed away in fear, sensing something was wrong. And the next moment, the hero unleashed a crushing blow on the enemies. The accumulated mana was instantly released in the form of chi with a powerful explosion. The guy exhaled heavily, admitting to himself that he hadn't spilled so much mana in a long time. The mutilated creatures screamed shrilly, blazing with residual bright light. The remains of the monsters fell down, and the survivors began to fall rapidly. The warrior's hand was instantly covered in powerful flashes of pure azure energy. He swung his arm sharply, preparing to unleash the power he had accumulated over 10 days. And then one of the monsters opened its toothy mouth in horror. The guy focused his aim on the crowd of creatures attacking him. The ferocious predator of Vulcan backed away in fear, sensing something was wrong. And the next moment, the hero unleashed a crushing blow on the enemies. The accumulated mana was instantly released in the form of ki with a powerful explosion. The guy exhaled heavily, admitting to himself that he hadn't spilled so much mana in a long time. The mutilated creatures screamed shrilly, blazing with residual bright light. The remains of the monsters fell down, and the survivors began to fall rapidly. The headless carcass collapsed dead, and a sparkling crystal fell to the ground. Calmly walking past the trophies, the warrior mentally announced the completion of the inspection. A sinister, passionate grin immediately appeared on his lips. He grinned madly, anticipating the possible chance to acquire the valuable eternal sparks. The hero bloodthirstily inquired how many sparks would come out of the remaining enemies. And then the guy rushed forward like a hurricane, mercilessly cutting down the frightened monsters. Deadly, precise strikes turned the wave of attackers into dust in the blink of an eye. Having finished the furious slaughter, the brunette stood relaxed at the mighty roots of the tree. Everywhere on the ground, among the cobblestones, a lonely gold coin shimmered forlornly. The guy slowly extended his hand down, intending to pick up this well-deserved trophy. Looking at the trophy, the boy was fascinated by the thought of the mysterious eternal sparks. He was overjoyed that he had managed to regain such great power. Suddenly, a bright, scorching flame burst from his palm. The hero looked with fascination at the blazing clot of energy right in his hands. The warrior understood that this would be too much for his current weak body, but right now he could easily absorb these valuable sparks. Having changed the mana attribute to fire, the brunette was enveloped in powerful streams of heat. Golden sparks swirled around him, anchoring a new destructive element. And then a surprised swordsman with blonde hair quietly approached from behind. The hero turned around abruptly, interrupting his thoughts about the long 10-minute absorption procedure. Around his bare foot on the grass, gold coins and crystals glittered enticingly. The warrior walked away confidently, determined to absorb as much power as possible. Meanwhile, in the city, a frightened crowd stared in fascination at the eerie rift. Reporters and photographers fussily recorded the dangerous anomaly near the police station on camera. Some annoyed man hissed a silent curse through his teeth in anger. Bang Sung-woo cursed angrily at the massive problems caused by one idiot. Kim Hyun-woo, who was standing nearby, calmly noted that the guy was saving his sister. But Song-woo retorted that the fool had entered the rift zone for the sake of awakening. Hyun-woo then added that Guildmaster Hyun had ordered them to prepare for an influx of monsters. The blue-haired boy was genuinely surprised to learn about the synchronous appearance of rifts across the world. People realized with horror that such a global cataclysm was happening for the first time, and then encouraging rumors began to circulate that the military was taking control of the situation. Meanwhile, Song-woo continued to furiously blame the damned madman for everything. The enraged man squeezed his hand, threatening to personally deal with the idiot who had walked in there. But in reality, the Crimson Rift continued to pulsate eerily over the rooftops. The tension was mounting, as 28 days had already passed since the discovery of the anomaly. A powerful wave of monsters was approaching, and the association officially declared the danger level at maximum. The news reported that the guy should be released within 2 days. Suddenly, the disgruntled man pressed a button, extinguishing the bright flash on the screen. Hwang Chang-seop asked sullenly if the guy's identity had been confirmed. Kim Yong-gu's subordinate estimated the likelihood of the boy returning from the rift at less than 1%. Hwang Chang-seop only grinned nastily, completely ruling out a successful outcome for an ordinary person. The surrounding bandits nodded fearfully, agreeing with the words of their stern boss. The guy who had been beaten by So-do-jun earlier timidly suggested that he might be awakened. The crime boss's assistant immediately objected, noting the impossibility of knowing the fighter's exact rank right now. Meanwhile, the boss leaned back in his chair, lighting another cigarette. Hwang Chang-seop sternly demanded that Do-jun's relatives be immediately found and taken under their wing. The bandits found the boy's blind sister and elderly grandmother in their modest home. In the event of the young man's death, the mafioso cynically planned to sell his defenseless family to black transplant surgeons. Suddenly, in the depths of a dangerous rift, the world tree burst into a blinding light. The hero, in powerful bursts of mana, asked himself in surprise how much time had passed. He looked at his palm in fascination because it had absorbed hundreds of eternal sparks. The guy was glad that he could now use the fire attribute whenever he wanted. The warrior realized that he had now become much more powerful than during his time as the sword god. He thoughtfully approached the mighty trunk and gently touched the bark with his hand. The brunette sincerely thanked the world tree for his past and present salvation. The azure glow around the magical giant gradually began to fade, saying goodbye to the warrior. The boy carefully collected all the scattered blood-red crystals into a wicker basket. As he left, the hero sadly whispered that he was completely unaware of the new meeting, and then he firmly promised to save the tree at the next danger. The boy turned around and promised to protect the world tree at any cost. Meanwhile, a huge full moon shone ominously over the deserted city. Suddenly, the hero quickly flew out of the depths of the mysterious rift. The barefoot warrior landed softly on the cold asphalt in the middle of the night street. He looked around in surprise, not finding a single person within a kilometer radius. The guy immediately guessed that the residents were evacuated due to a possible wave of monsters. Suddenly he felt a strange, hostile aura at the end of the deserted alley. And then the brunette slipped forward unnoticed, tightly clutching the basket of crystals. And then, around the corner, he saw 2 men in formal business suits. The young man froze in fear, instantly recognizing his pursuers by their distinctive expensive clothes. The guy launched a clot of furious flame into the sky with a powerful throw. A fiery projectile flew swiftly directly over the roof of a city building. A second later, a powerful explosion thundered, painting everything around gold. Eyewitnesses were alarmed, not understanding where this eerie sound suddenly came from. People stared in panic at the ominous glow growing in the distance. The huge building immediately burst into flames, causing random passers-by to turn around in fear. The man in the suit cursed, panicking and not understanding the cause of the sudden fire. The culprit of the chaos calmly walked away, mentally praising the accuracy of the throw and the nature of the flame. The black-haired boy thought that even Cusack would probably admire this sight. After all, he was once the most powerful fire mage on the entire continent. Suddenly, the blue-haired guy froze in place, noticing something strange. He immediately ordered his partner to stand, causing him to look puzzled. The young man added that the rift hanging in the sky looked somehow strange. Meanwhile, the ominous crimson crack continued to pulsate directly above the houses. Realizing something was wrong, both partners immediately broke into a run. The running red-haired man asked in shock if it was really a rift, and then he opened his eyes wide in great fear. But in fact, the mysterious crimson rift was already completely disappearing. Meanwhile, the half-naked culprit of the commotion was calmly climbing the night stairs. Finally, the black-haired guy turned around indifferently, assessing the scale of the chaos that had arisen. The next morning, breaking news about the missing fault was shown on TV. The announcer announced that the Hero Association was surprised by what happened and had launched an investigation. Passers-by on the street were excitedly discussing the strange fire that had broken out near the fault. The crowd of onlookers was gossiping loudly that the missing Mr. So deserved to die. The black-haired guy watching them mentally called their words complete nonsense. He understood perfectly well that without the rift disappearing, Seoul would turn into hell. The boy was annoyed that now he would never be able to see the mysterious world tree. Adjusting his hood, he philosophically noted that this had its advantages. Soon the guy approached some shabby Korean establishment on the street. And inside, on the stairs, stood bandits, maliciously discussing the death of Mr. So. The scoundrel took a drag on his cigarette, cynically thinking about the deceased's growing granddaughter. Suddenly, his companion stopped short at an unexpected stranger's call. A stranger came out of the dark corridor to meet the bandits, demanding to see their boss. Meanwhile, a luxury black car parked at the entrance with a squeal of brakes. A foot in an expensive shoe confidently stepped out of the foreign car onto the asphalt. The imposing boss in sunglasses came outside, adjusting his hair with a comb. He grinned maliciously, glad to finally be able to sleep peacefully after the death of his enemy. The man immediately asked his manager Kim about the schedule for today. Pushing his glasses up, the boss ordered that Madame Khan be told to tell the new girls to dress up nicely. After this, the crime boss began to slowly climb the building's stairs. The bandit standing on guard widened his eyes in fear, noticing the uninvited guest out of the corner of his eye. A second later, the guy knocked his opponent out with a powerful blow. Hearing a loud roar, the crime boss froze in fear, covered in beads of sweat. Meanwhile, the hooded stranger quickly dispersed the remaining mafia henchmen. Having dealt with the security, the menacing young man calmly stood in the middle of the ransacked office. In a chilling tone, he ordered the leader to crawl here like a dog. The crime boss's hands began to shake wildly under such wild pressure, and the uninvited guest was already sprawled out in the chair, his feet up on the table. The guy menacingly asked the stunned bandit if he really couldn't hear him at all. The frightened authority figure crawled obediently on his knees to the table under a stern gaze. The guy sternly snapped that such a dog did not deserve human treatment. The mafioso, scared to death, trembled and forced out the first semblance of a bark. The wheel of the office chair moved slightly as the young man rocked lazily on it. The next moment, the defeated crime boss barked shrilly throughout the room. The rest of the gang's henchmen looked at each other in fear as they listened to the humiliating sounds of their boss. The menacing guest in the hood coldly ordered the former leader to bark much louder. He added contemptuously that these disgusting scumbags were always ready to stab you in the back. By calling the bandit Huang Changseop, the guy reminded everyone of his ability to subdue scoundrels. The humiliated authority begged for mercy, promising to be faithful like a devoted dog. However, the uninvited guest sharply ordered him to shut up, powerfully kicking him in the jaw. The beaten bandit fell backwards, dead, having completely lost consciousness after the kick. Manager Kim stared at the fallen crime boss in complete shock. The impudent guy languidly announced to the frightened manager that from now on he was the boss. The deposed authority lay helplessly on the floor, quietly moaning from unbearable pain. Shocked, Kim swallowed nervously, not believing such a crazy proposal. The man bowed low and objected that his boss had too many connections. In a panic, the manager begged to spare his boss at least this time. The gloomy young man dryly reminded them that they were experts at drowning people or putting them under pressure. In a chilling tone, he threatened to simply throw the beaten leader to be eaten by the monsters. These terrible words left Kim completely stunned, feeling a real, primal horror. And then the fallen boss screamed hysterically, begging for mercy on his sinful life. Huang Chang-sub swore to serve the boy forever, like the most loyal dog. However, the black-haired young man only looked indifferently and sullenly at the crawling gangster. The guy thought it was worth finishing off Huang Chang-sub for his own peace of mind. Suddenly he sighed heavily, mentally reproaching himself for being too merciful. The stern stranger extended his hand and ordered the fallen leader to give him his palm. The beaten crime boss opened his mouth in surprise and great fear. The shaking bandit extended his hand in response, tearfully begging for forgiveness for past sins. At that very moment, the black-haired guy's eyes flashed ominously with a furious amber fire, and then the hand of the unfortunate mafioso was instantly engulfed in a powerful, all-consuming flame. The formidable young man coldly warned the bandit that this was his last chance. The frightened authority stared in fascination at the stranger's palm, enveloped in bright flame. The next moment, the unfortunate gangster's hand was completely charred by a powerful burn. Huang Changsub let out a wild howl of pain as the boy walked away. Finally, the stranger threatened to destroy the mafioso for the slightest scratch on his family. Meanwhile, Dojun was still officially considered missing. Life in Seoul went on as usual, past the bright signs of street eateries. A Dojun sat quietly in the cafe with his little sister. The government and the media continued to treat the guy as if he had died long ago. He understood that his sudden official resurrection would only bring a lot of unnecessary problems. Dujong looked at his sister affectionately, planning their quick and peaceful move. The girl devoured the burger with gusto, squinting contentedly at the filling food. The little girl smiled happily, admitting that she really liked the idea of moving. The young man added that in the new place, she will be able to go to school normally. But suddenly the girl became very sad and stared at her French fries. Her brother asked in surprise if she really didn't like kindergarten at all. The little girl sadly admitted that other children constantly tease her because of her parents' absence. At these words, Dujong angrily and tightly clenched his teeth. The guy calmed his sister down by suggesting that she not communicate with these little freaks at all. The girl instantly brightened up, genuinely happy at the permission to no longer go to kindergarten. The guy in the hoodie was thinking about transferring the girl to a prestigious private school. The interlocutor was outraged by the idea of placing an elderly person and a child in a motel. In the corridor, he asked his partner point-blank if he had completely lost his mind. The man in glasses justified himself by citing security and their company's control over the motel. A joyful girl's scream was heard from the room on the bed. The little girl immediately jumped up and hugged Dojun tightly. The elderly woman rejoiced with tears in her eyes at his safe return. The girl continued to cry with happiness, burying her face in her beloved boyfriend. Dujong stood there, taken aback by such an emotional and warm welcome. And then, a slight, relieved smile finally appeared on his face. Sitting in a cafe, the girl suddenly asked if he was also a hero. The guy asked her what her true desires were, but the little girl shook her head. She remembered that real heroes always fight bravely against terrible monsters. Because of these dangerous battles, great defenders sometimes die tragically. In the child's drawing, she and her grandmother simply wanted to be together forever. The little girl looked down sadly at the half-eaten burger on the tray. Dujong listened to her words in silence, his lips pursed as memories flooded his mind. A heavy silence fell, and the girl quietly called out to her silent opponent. Meanwhile, he remembered the cruel past world with erupting fiery volcanoes. In that endless, merciless fight with monsters, he lost too much. But now something truly valuable has appeared in his life again. Dujun was determined to live in this world, protecting the little happiness. Meanwhile, the helicopter flew over the sun-drenched metropolis of South Korea. The camera panned to the majestic high-rise building of the South Korean Heroes Association. The formidable founder of the association, Na Tai-hwan, sternly questioned his subordinate at the window. The girl in the suit guiltily reported the impossibility of determining anything right now. The man walked away disappointedly, talking about the suddenly disappeared dangerous rift. The assistant carelessly remarked that the disappearance of the rift was much better than a wave of monsters. Na Tai-hwan glared at her, causing her to apologize immediately. After all, this powerful man was one of the 100 most respected heroes of the planet. He was solely interested in the safety of people and the readiness to combat the threats of faults. Na Tai-hwan ordered a thorough investigation, delighted by the residents' agreement to sell the house. He ordered that the man be paid generously to console him after the loss of a family member. Suddenly, someone's hand clicked sharply on the keyboard of an open laptop. The association leader turned around, peering closely at the information appearing on the screen. In fact, fault lines have opened up in parallel in other large countries. The assistant asked in surprise if the US and China weren't in control of the situation. Meanwhile, the leader added that reliable heroes have already been sent to other zones. Suddenly, a new important notification icon popped up on the screen with a loud sound. Na Tai-hwan's eyes widened in shock, not believing the shocking data he saw. The camera moved to a busy city street near a modern overground station. Dujong, wearing a gray hoodie, walked confidently through the dense crowd of passers-by. Soon he approached a brightly colored shop with a festive sign advertising the purchase of Meganstones. A welcoming metal bell rang softly above the glass entrance door. The young man behind the counter lazily began to say the standard words of greeting. Suddenly he screamed in fear, noticing the stern guest who had entered. The guy called out to the manager in a trembling voice, pointing to the guy in the hood who had appeared. The serious man in glasses crumpled the newspaper in his hand in surprise. He hissed angrily. Could this really be that impudent seller of stones without commission? Dujong calmly replied that he had just brought a new batch for sale. The guy abruptly threw the heavy dark backpack right onto the clean floor. The manager arrogantly refused to do business, expecting a pile of unprocessed low-grade stones. Dujong calmly asked if they were really backing out of the deal. The man irritably explained that the meager commission was causing them nothing but losses. He smirked contemptuously, finally sending the uninvited guest out of the shop. While discussing the distribution of stones, the merchant demonstratively turned away and scratched the back of his head. Adjusting his glasses, the boss angrily ordered everyone to take their things and leave for good. Suddenly, the guy in the gray hoodie smoothly unzipped his backpack. Luxurious red crystals fell out of the open bag onto the floor with a crash. The impudent young assistant's eyes widened in shock at the rare wealth he saw. The bespectacled man stared at the goods in shock, not believing his own eyes. The man screamed in shock, recognizing the hero's priceless magic stones. The guy in the hood coldly suggested forgetting about the deal. And then the hero's majestic magic stone appeared before his eyes. Meanwhile, the Mexican drug dealer Kurzaman once bought them by the ton. Suddenly there was a bang in the laboratory, taking the businessman by surprise. As a result, a hidden power was revealed, and the drug dealer woke up a hero. The traders froze, blinded by the radiance of the expensive artifact. The guest ordered the stones to be put into a bag and was getting ready to leave. The frightened businessman immediately ingratiatingly asked the client to wait a little. The assistant obediently began to collect the shining artifacts scattered across the table. The buyer simply calmly sipped his cold coffee through a plastic straw. The merchant nervously muttered that a 0.5% commission was clearly too much. The guest indifferently said that in that case, he would simply leave. Suddenly, the frightened businessman inquired about the reason for such a sharp drop in interest rates. The man in glasses fell to his knees, admitting his stupid mistake. And then the guy demanded a clear answer about adjusting the commission. Meanwhile, a witness standing at a distance silently called the guest an uncouth boor. Covered in a cold sweat, the businessman gritted his teeth and gave his reluctant consent. But the bespectacled man again launched into a long explanation and immediately received a reprimand. The merchant panicked and dropped the price to 9%, begging him not to leave. And then, the bespectacled man started shouting about 8%, fearing the wrath of his boss. However, the guest cynically continued to reduce the commission to 6%. In utter despair, the unfortunate intermediary simply fell to his knees before him. Meanwhile, the guy with yellow eyes graciously allowed the commission to be adjusted to 1%. The bespectacled man literally howled at the top of his voice at the sight of such a brazen robbery. But there was nothing to be done. I had to hide my rage and submit to this force. With a sly grin, the guy decided to immediately clarify one more important detail. His chilling gaze made the mediator's insides clench completely. The merchant's assistant froze in a state of wild, paralyzing horror. The frightened, bespectacled man screamed at the assistant, demanding that he bring the contract immediately. Meanwhile, the guy figured that at this rate he would quickly get rich. But then he gloomily noted the lack of gates for collecting high-level stones. But in reality, he desperately wanted to freely pass into the fault zones. Suddenly, an emergency and extremely unexpected sound alert came on the guest's phone. And then he read a shocking announcement about the beginning of a large-scale wave. The guy's gaze instantly became stern, revealing his inner tension. He carefully read the details, understanding the seriousness of the impending threat. His amber eyes narrowed furiously with rising anger. The guy dryly said as he left that ordinary people without abilities would not be able to survive there. Previously, the guy would rush to close any dangerous fault zones without thinking. And then he realized that he would no longer live by the old principles. Meanwhile, delicious pieces of meat sizzled jukily on the hot grill grate. The girl sitting next to him stared at the food in fascination, drooling with hunger. The whole company finally gathered around the table of a cozy barbecue restaurant. The elderly woman's eyes widened in fear, astonished by the exorbitant price on the menu. Dujong calmly drank water, assuring his companions of his enormous earnings. The waiter carefully brought the juicy piece right to the girl's face with his chopsticks. Suddenly she swallowed the tender meat in an instant, closing her eyes contentedly. But in fact, her gaze literally shone with indescribable bliss. The baby screamed amusingly with delight, enjoying the incredible and juicy taste. Grandma continued to watch the frying delicacy with excitement and obvious distrust. Suddenly, the guy looked at her intently and very seriously. Dujong generously ordered the waitress 4 servings of the most elite meat dishes. The elderly woman was confused and worried whether the 3 of them would be able to eat that much. But the guy just smiled cheerfully and urged everyone to eat until they were full. The grandmother was taken aback when a piece was carefully held right to her lips. Yin Young, with a radiant smile, hurried to treat her to the most delicious piece. The elderly woman was touched by the girl's kindness and slowly began to chew the treat. And then she was stunned, frozen in place by the divine taste of premium beef. The happy family continued their meal cheerfully, enjoying the moment in the cozy restaurant. Suddenly, someone's confident steps in formal trousers disturbed their peace. Meanwhile, a long-haired, purple-haired stranger resolutely approached their table. So Do-jun, his mouth full, turned around in confusion at the unfamiliar voice. An elegant woman in glasses insistently suggested that the guy immediately step aside to talk. But Do-jun sharply cut her off, asking her not to disturb the family dinner. The guy coldly added that she should wait until the end of their hearty lunch. The visitor fell silent, stunned, turning her back to the protagonist. Suddenly, Hyunju Yeon became wildly angry at such a brazen disregard. In fact, the girl was sincerely amazed by the incomprehensible audacity of this strange man. The woman walked away proudly, leaving behind only a waiting area sign. Hyunju Yeon stood at a distance, watching the people dining peacefully with annoyance. Suddenly, all the restaurant patrons began to turn around to look at her excitedly. People looked sideways at the menacing purple-haired guest in surprise, discussing the situation in whispers. Eyewitnesses immediately recognized her as a world star and S-rank heroine. The people were genuinely perplexed as to what kind of incredible person Ju Yeon could so meekly wait for. But in fact, the heroine was mentally studying the data of Do-jun, who survived the gate. 2 months ago, he was officially declared dead in the new Mapo fault. But the guy was clearly alive and was now calmly devouring the juicy meat. And then Ju Yeon remembered how he had made her tense up quite a bit. Ju Yeon thought that an ordinary guy couldn't possibly have such a special ability. With a sharp creak, the wooden chair suddenly moved to the side. The company cheerfully thanked them for the food and finally rose from the table. Do-jun calmly walked out, ignoring Ju Yeon standing at the door. Suddenly, the heavy step of a stranger made everyone turn around in fear. The guy suddenly froze, feeling a powerful and hostile aura behind him. A huge man with a mad grin appeared before him, grinning ominously. The impudent man mockingly called Do-jun an incredibly tenacious and disgusting cockroach. Ju Yeon was taken aback when she recognized the dangerous Kang Chul in the uninvited guest. And then the big guy loomed over the guy, getting ready to start a bloody showdown. Do-jong calmly pushed the insolent man away with his hand as he walked past him. The guy calmly turned to Ju Yeon, reminding her of her previous proposal. Kang Chul blinked his eyes in shock, surprised by the sudden intervention of a stranger. The hero told Ju Yeon to put his beloved family in a taxi. Behind Do-jun, a frightened grandmother hugged her granddaughter tightly. The world star was taken aback by such an unexpected and powerful order. Suddenly, the guy's eyes flashed with an otherworldly golden fire. The enemy grinned madly, anticipating a quick and cruel reprisal. Meanwhile, the full moon had already risen above the restaurant sign. Soon, Ju Yeon carefully seated his relatives in a black car. The world star said a warm goodbye to the girl who was looking out of the window in fear. The purple-haired Ju Yeon waved her hand at the car as it drove away quickly. The taxi quickly disappeared into the bright lights of the night metropolis. Suddenly, inside the establishment, a massive chair shattered into pieces with a roar. A frightened buzz of shocked and confused visitors immediately arose around. Suddenly, Kang Chul staggered from a powerful blow to the jaw. And then the big guy began to gnash his teeth furiously, filling with wild, insane anger. The frightened waitress tried to timidly intervene and stop the impending fight. But the madman roughly pushed her away, causing her to fall backwards with a scream. Meanwhile, panic broke out in the hall and people rushed out. An enraged Kang Chul screamed wildly, promising to immediately finish off the impudent bastard. At the same moment, his fist cut through the air with a deafening whistle. Suddenly, Do-jun dodged with lightning speed, his white eyes flashing. And then the guy's powerful counterattack hit the target. The crushing attack sent the big man reeling, barely able to maintain his balance. The protagonist clenched his fist sternly, ready to continue the tough fight. Do-jong grimly reminded the enemy of the treacherously locked gates of death. But in reality, the guy coldly demanded an honest answer. Meanwhile, the defeated Kang Chul sarcastically revealed the secret about his stepmother's order. The calm Do-jun only silently took out his smartphone from his pocket. The guy confidently pressed the start button, starting the audio recording on his phone. Do-jun calmly ordered the stunned Kang Chul to repeat everything from the beginning. Suddenly, the big guy grinned mockingly, calling his opponent's words complete nonsense. And then the huge man's fist was instantly engulfed in a powerful, furious flame. With a wild roar, the enemy made a crushing lunge, aiming straight at the face. The bandit maliciously wished for Do-jun to die right here and now. But in fact, the guy's eyes narrowed sharply and dangerously. The enemy tried to grab the hero with a flaming hand, but he blocked the blow. At that very moment, a powerful blast wave literally shook the entire establishment. Meanwhile, the stunned Kang Chul realized that the guy had managed to jump back. In reality, Do-jun suddenly extended his hand, shrouded in telekinesis, forward. An invisible and powerful force instantly threw the huge brute high into the air. The guy cold-bloodedly threw the helplessly flying Kang Chul straight onto the dining table. There was a deafening roar, and the wooden furniture shattered into pieces from the powerful impact. The employee, terrified to tears, frantically tried to call the police with trembling hands. Suddenly, the purple-haired heroine decisively grabbed the phone, dropping the current call. Ju Yan smiled cheerfully, promising the worried woman to personally resolve all the problems. The establishment's employee was taken aback, bowing profusely and warmly, thanking the world star for his help. And then Du Zhong dealt his opponent a series of crushing and lightning-fast blows. Ju Yan was surprised to see that the strong B-rank hero had turned into an ordinary punching bag. The stranger in shoes wondered how the A-rank warrior had managed to destroy a more powerful opponent. Suddenly, a commanding female voice called out to Mr. Sodujun, causing him to freeze. The purple-haired girl sternly warned that the wounded man would definitely die if the fight continued. The guy just glared furiously with his creepy, bloodshot amber eye. Meanwhile, the defeated enemy continued to bleed helplessly at their feet. The guest excitedly asked how the guy knew so many hidden details. However, the brunette calmly replied that he knew absolutely all the important things. And then the girl gloomily added that there was another hidden nuance in the case. In fact, the deceased turned out to be a close relative of the most dangerous S-rank hero. But the guy calmly clarified why this should be a problem at all. The guest realized with horror that Seo Do-jun had acted completely recklessly. The girl added that the influential Kang Yun-pyo would not forgive such a thing. In response, So Do-jun only gave her an arrogant and sinister grin. The purple-haired girl asked in shock if the guy was really not afraid of the angry hero at all. And then the brunette calmly admitted that he was only concerned about her awareness. His chilling gaze instantly made the atmosphere in the room tense to the limit. The interlocutor confidently faced this heavy pressure, without retreating for a second. But in fact, the guy simply reminded her of her promise to sort things out. They continued to silently exchange heavy glances in the middle of the ransacked store. A dangerous amber light flashed in Sodujun's eyes again. The purple-haired guest narrowed her eyes coolly, considering her next steps. She then politely apologized for the sudden visit on her uncle's behalf. The girl remembered his recent sales of valuable magical stones in Gasan. Seo Do-jun indifferently asked about the specific price of her offer. The guest confidently declared her readiness to buy absolutely all available goods. The brunette only smiled skeptically, hinting at the impressive number of rare stones. The interlocutor arrogantly reminded me of the colossal financial resources of S-rank heroes. And then the guy agreed to the deal, but put forward one tough condition. Seo Do-jun slyly added that Hyun Ju-yeon would easily handle this task. Suddenly, some wooden barrel shattered into small pieces with a loud crash. The blonde in the red dress screamed furiously that this guy should be dead. The angry woman threw a bottle of expensive alcohol with all her might straight at the wall. The bald subordinate lowered his eyes guiltily, justifying the Hero Association's decision to declare the warrior dead. The woman furiously demanded real action, flatly refusing to listen to any ridiculous excuses. However, the man timidly added the shocking news of Kang Cheol-woo's beating. And then the blonde fearfully assumed that So Do-jun knew the whole truth. She swallowed convulsively, completely losing her former composure from sudden panic. The woman gloomily stated the need to hide the incident from her grandfather in order to save the company's shares. Meanwhile, she commanded that the police and all corrupt media outlets be immediately silenced. The assistant obediently reported that the mouths of journalists and cops were already securely shut. With a sigh of relief, the tired blonde finally sank limply into a leather chair. However, Manager I immediately warned that this was only a temporary solution. The assistant whispered in fear that the beaten Kang Cheol-woo was Kang Yun-pyo's cousin. The woman, stunned, asked again whether he was talking about her personal acquaintance. Meanwhile, Kang Cheol-woo always had a reputation as a scumbag in high society. Those around him sincerely believed that the powerful Kang Yun-pyo madly adored his brother. But in reality, the bastard simply did all the dirty work without complaint. Baldy added gloomily that the S-rank hero had probably already begun to act. And then the blonde resolutely demanded that an urgent meeting be arranged for her with So Do-jun. Finally, she sullenly asked whether the influential president Hwang Chang-seop had really betrayed them. The woman furiously ordered to contact Prosecutor Pak for cruel revenge on the traitor. Meanwhile, a group of armed mercenaries gathered intently in front of the dark entrance to the rift. Security guards vigilantly monitored the entrance, allowing only hunters licensed by the association to enter. The security guard carefully checked the documents of the purple-haired Hyun Ju-yeon, wishing her good health. Soon the entire squad fearlessly disappeared into the frightening depths of the rocky cave. And then the guy hiding his face under the hood noticed the strict control at the only entrance. Guild leader Jang In-ju sarcastically called Hyun Ju-young's proposal very unusual. The violet-haired girl dryly said that she was simply bored in the low-ranking rifts. Hyun Ju-yeon turned around warily, sensing someone's invisible presence. But in fact, the guy in the hood followed them silently. The guy in the hood reminded that he had only one condition. Hyun-ju-yeon was frightened and wondered if he had really lost his mind for this. Meanwhile, in any case, she urgently needed valuable magic stones. The hunting party finally quickly left the gloomy cave, emerging into the dense forest. Jung In-ju demanded to know the identity of the mysterious stalker with a sly smile, and then the companion sarcastically asked if the stranger was her potential boyfriend. But the purple-haired girl quickly objected, calling the joint trip merely the fulfillment of someone else's request. The mercenaries ahead calmly confirmed that the passage into the zone was completely open. Suddenly, the girl walking in front froze in shock, noticing something frightening ahead. But in fact, the guy from under the hood was closely watching their every step. The entire squad immediately took up battle positions in a forest clearing, awaiting an attack. A huge, ferocious, feathered monster with claws suddenly swooped down on the mercenaries from above. Jung In-ju screamed in horror, instantly recognizing the monster as the dangerous Caucastrian. Hyun-ju-yeon furiously ordered her comrades to immediately go into a defensive position. Suddenly, the guy in the hood made a lightning-fast and unexpected jump upward. And then the purple-haired girl, stunned, shouted out the name of the fearless Mr. Seo Do-jun. The rest of the guild's mercenaries froze in fear, watching in shock at the lone wolf's crazy maneuver. Jung In-ju's mouth dropped open in shock, indescribable surprise and panic. Meanwhile, Seo Do-jun delivered a crushing blow with a fist enveloped in crimson energy. But in reality, the guy fell down like a stone, attacking the giant bird. The short-haired mercenary grumbled discontentedly that they had only just entered the gate. Suddenly, someone's hand abruptly pulled the purple-haired Hyun-ju-yeon back. And then the girl screamed in shock, calling on her comrades to immediately hold the defense. Suddenly, a huge monster furiously jumped out at them from the thicket. There was a deafening roar of a crushing collision right in the middle of a forest clearing. So Do-jun fearlessly charged head-on at the flying monster. The boy's amber eye flared with a dangerous, chilling golden light. The giant bird opened its beak in shock, clearly not expecting such a swift response. The guy's powerful blow pierced the winged monster with a dull sound. In reality, Hyun-ju-yeon continued to watch him in shock. The huge carcass of the defeated winged monster fell with a dull roar right in front of the guy. The giant bird powerlessly closed its eyes, having finally lost all its vitality. The confused mercenary asked in shock whether the monster had really been killed with just one blow. Seo Do-jun added calmly that the fight was not really over yet. And then he furiously fell upon the wounded bird, finishing it off dead. The witnesses of this insane scene froze in shock, speechless with fear. The scarred girl screamed in fear, trying to comprehend the incredible, monstrous power of this man. Hyun-ju-yeon just remained silent, puzzled and gloomy, staring intently at the brunette. The friend angrily grabbed the purple-haired girl by the shoulders, demanding an immediate and clear explanation. However, Hyun-ju-yeon only excitedly reminded that ordinary murder was within anyone's capabilities. The companion fiercely argued that the monster had flown straight into the air from one blow. The purple-haired girl with glasses stared in shock at the sight of the recent battle. And then she was fascinated by the thought of who this swordsman really was. Suddenly, she sharply commanded her adopted sister to immediately change her plan of action. The girl then announced to the team that she would personally go and check the central area. Suddenly, the guy cold-bloodedly plunged a knife into the carcass of the fallen bird. The guy snapped that he had no intention of sharing his spoils with slackers. The interlocutor calmly replied that she had no intention of asking for her share. Meanwhile, she inquired whether this powerful swordsman planned to go deeper, and the stranger only grinned slyly and ominously in response to the question. The guy defiantly agreed that such a trip would be very interesting. The girl confidently walked forward, promising to lead him through this dangerous zone. And then they rushed at great speed into the very depths of the forest. The swordsman who remained behind silently watched his purple-haired companion quickly run away. But in fact, he immediately jumped up and rushed to catch up. Meanwhile, the surprise team just watched the powerful shockwave from the run. The guild members mentally compared this guy's incredible speed to a swift beam of light. The remaining warriors immediately realized that it was absolutely impossible to keep up with these monsters. The leaders decided to resign themselves to their secondary role and simply clean up the area. The team sadly turned around and wandered away from the fallen huge bird. She mentally lamented that ordinary people were praising them as A-rank heroes, but compared to S-rank and Juyan, they seemed like bugs. The girl watched the rapidly disappearing couple with bated breath. Meanwhile, the purple-haired companion was racing along the forest path at full speed. She was completely focused on running and pushing herself to the limit. The girl briefly considered whether she should slow down a bit from her breakneck speed. Suddenly, the swordsman easily caught up with her and even pulled ahead. And then the astonished runner suddenly braked from the guy's unexpected maneuver. She was stunned, as she was considered the second fastest in Korea. Meanwhile, the swordsman ran ahead casually, without even straining his strength. The guy turned around and ironically noted that his companion was running surprisingly slowly. The girl was panting heavily from fatigue, desperately trying to catch her breath. Ahead of them, a huge rocky mountain rose majestically from the dense forest. The girl suddenly froze and pointed in surprise to the top of this hill. Taking a closer look, she stared in fascination at the mysterious location spread out ahead. It turned out that it was at this very peak that the most dangerous boss of the Rift Zone lived. She warned that this 20-meter-tall giant pterodactyl required 3 S-rank heroes. The swordsman immediately and calmly asked about the valuable magic stone inside the monster. Then he silently turned around and resolutely walked straight towards the monster's lair. The frightened companion shouted excitedly after him, begging him not to do anything stupid. The girl looked fearfully after the guy, who was quickly running away into the distance. She was in a panic, not understanding what exactly this crazy swordsman had planned. As he ran, his companion desperately shouted at him to stop immediately, and then they rushed at breakneck speed straight into the monster's lair. Their rapid run along the forest road raised huge clouds of dust. Meanwhile, ahead of them, a gloomy and inaccessible rock loomed ominously. Suddenly, the girl's eyes widened in horror from a sudden loud roar. And then she froze in shock, not understanding what had just happened. Suddenly, the same giant pterodactyl fell dead in front of her, and the swordsman calmly put away his blade, instantly destroying the boss in an instant. The girl remembered with fear that the monstrous Khazarian was actually incredibly strong. Meanwhile, Park Hae-yeol was a renowned S-rank hero and monster slayer. The first time he bravely led 30 strong fighters into battle. Then suddenly, they all died tragically, leaving the leader as the only survivor. After this crushing defeat, the warrior furiously vowed to take cruel revenge on the creature. Park Hae-yeol took a whole army of loyal warriors on his new campaign. The archers instantly opened up with a barrage of fire, filling the entire sky with sharp arrows. And then, powerful projectiles flew straight at the target at great speed. Suddenly, strong green chains tightly bound the huge neck of the ferocious dragon. Then the furious leader, with a menacing cry, personally rushed into the final assault. The enraged dragon opened its mouth wide, preparing to incinerate the impudent invaders. A huge flash of flame instantly covered the positions of the frightened warriors. Having suffered colossal losses, the surviving soldiers screamed in horror and helplessness. And then on the battlefield, there remained only the charred silhouettes of the dead. The weakened Mega Guild under the leadership of its leader was never able to recover. Meanwhile, the guy looked indifferently at his companion, who was speechless from shock. She angrily reminded him that he had made no contribution at all. The girl admitted that she would never have believed what she saw without witnesses. Suddenly, the image of a menacing flying monster appeared before my eyes again. But in reality, this infamous boss fell only. In his hand, a huge, power-filled crimson crystal glowed ominously. The guy looked gloomily at the valuable trophy, estimating its true value. Without wasting any time, he calmly put the magic stone into his bag. Finally, the brunette told his companion that he would go on alone. The girl asked in surprise if he would really leave the rest of the valuable materials. Her unexpected words made the guy suddenly freeze in his tracks. Turning around, he only grinned insolently and condescendingly in her face. The purple-haired companion was completely speechless at such insolence. As he left, the swordsman arrogantly allowed her to take the rest as payment for the journey, and the astonished girl just silently looked after him, digesting what she had heard. The guy haughtily said as he left that he didn't need these crumbs. Meanwhile, an excited group of surviving hunters gathered in a forest clearing. The huge backpack fell heavily onto the soft green grass. The hunters stared in shock at the prey they had brought, not believing their eyes. The red-haired guy emotionally told his comrades about the incredible number of magic stones. To collect such trophies, an entire guild would have to hunt continuously for 3 days. The purple-haired girl sitting on a boulder wondered irritably who he even was. The huntress added thoughtfully that it wasn't just a matter of the number of stones. The scarred warrior froze sternly, realizing the terrifying truth of Ju Yon's words. After all, such a triumph would have guaranteed the stranger the status of South Korea's strongest hero. Heavy footsteps were heard from behind, causing the girl with the scar to turn around instantly. A brunette confidently emerged from the forest thicket with 2 stuffed bags. All the hunters present suddenly fell silent, watching the silent guy. He calmly walked up to the backpacks and began methodically filling them with trophies. The partners spoke quietly, deciding to keep this crazy foray a secret. Ju Yon took a step forward, her feet softly treading on the yellowed grass. The entire team silently watched her strange dialogue with the mysterious stranger. The hunters began to joke in low voices that the two were clearly flirting with each other. From the outside, they really did seem like an incredibly beautiful and harmonious couple. Suddenly, the scarred warrior sternly interrupted them, calling on them to stop their stupid gossip. She was shocked by his casual attitude towards the powerful Ju Yon. The purple-haired girl just squeaked in confusion when the guy silently handed her the backpack. Under the surprised glances of the other boys, he simply walked away across the clearing. The companions were genuinely perplexed as to how it was possible to leave without even saying goodbye. The short-haired ally asked skeptically if he had really left them all the backpacks. Juyeon reminded him that she had promised the boy instant fame for killing Kazarian. However, he only replied indifferently that he didn't need fame at all. The shocked girl from the rescued squad sincerely did not understand what kind of person he was. Juyeon herself silently sank into deep thoughts, her gaze lowered. And then her cheeks flushed red at the thought of this mysterious guy. Meanwhile, the plot moved to a huge modern metropolis with high-rise buildings. The events took place in front of a sports complex called BHY. Inside the building, someone was viciously and mercilessly beating a red punching bag. A gray-haired man with eyes burning with rage delivered powerful blows. Another powerful swing literally tore the poor sports equipment in half. The man breathed heavily, staring at the result of his furious outburst of anger. It was Park Hae-yeol, frustrated with his terrible physical condition. The suited assistant urged the chief to calm down and remember the wisdom of the slow frog. He added that his resilience during difficult times would only strengthen his reputation. Park Hae-yeol agreed, promising to strike back at all the arrogant scoundrels. The assistant flatteringly assured that soon everyone would fall prostrate before the head of the guild. And he added that no one in the world knows Kazarian better than Pak. The secretary handed the boss a bottle of water, predicting that he would become history's greatest hero. The heated Park Hae-yeol arrogantly and confidently intercepted the refreshing drink. He laughed loudly, boasting that no one knew the monster better than him. On the shelf stood cups and an old photo of the once huge guild. The man grinned smugly, calling himself the only one who would kill this bird. The fawning secretary shouted enthusiastically, confirming the boss's unique and invincible power. Their wild, booming laughter echoed from the windows of the BHY sports complex. Meanwhile, a dossier on that very guy appeared in an official document. Another S-rank hero, Kang Yoon-pyo, looked at Seo Do-jun's personal file with surprise. The secretary recalled that several months ago, Kang Chaeil-woo tried to get rid of the guy. And then Yoon-pyo was amazed, because the guy not only survived, but also woke up. A subordinate reported that Hong Hee-ju from T Group was chasing after this boy. It turned out that Do-jun was the illegitimate and abandoned son of the company president. After learning about the cruel family secrets of the Chaebols, Kang Yoon-pyo grinned sinisterly. Then the man rose languidly from the sofa, deciding to clarify the price of the work done. The speaker announced a colossal figure of 3 billion, surprising his boss. Yoon-pyo confidently reached out his hand towards the golf club standing nearby. The assistant confirmed that the hired idiot had screwed up, gone blind, and was now dying. Kang Yoon-pyo simply coldly and indifferently called what happened cruel. The man calmly took aim and skillfully rolled the ball along the green path. In his place, he would have bloodthirstily torn out limbs and crushed the skull. The secretary continued his report, mentioning strange events at the scene. He added that rumors had spread about Hong Hee-ju helping the boy. With a soft thud, the golf ball rolled confidently straight to the hole. Kang Yoon-pyo suddenly flared up, trying to understand Hee-ju's motives and connection. The frightened subordinate hesitated, adding that thanks to her testimony, the incident was hushed up. The boss angrily grabbed the secretary by the lapels, demanding to find out the whole story of the relationship. The guy, trembling with terror, flew out of the room like a bullet to carry out the order. Left alone, Kang Yoon-pyo narrowed his eyes angrily and cunningly. His powerful, sinewy hand gripped the base of the club in a death grip. With a furious whistle, he smashed the expensive equipment on the floor with all his might. The man grinned predatorily, anticipating the imminent visit of the wealthy heiress Hong Hee-ju. He cold-bloodedly decided to hire her since the late Cheol-woo was useless. Kang Yoon-pyo licked his lips madly, confident in the Chaebol's enormous financial potential. Meanwhile, the full moon shone brightly and serenely over the quiet city at night. So Do-jun walked calmly and leisurely along the dark street fences. The guy mentally noted that hunting in the rift turned out to be much more effective than the gate. To get past the watchful guards, he would definitely need Juyeon. Juyeon warned that selling the Kazarian stones would lead to unnecessary searches for the original owner. She offered to keep them temporarily, if fame was not important. And then the guy silently and without further ado handed her the backpack. So Do-jun was finally convinced of the need to look for new routes into the rifts. However, first he decided to have a good rest in his new cozy home. With a quiet creak, the guy carefully opened the front door to the hallway. Suddenly his golden eyes sparkled in surprise and caution in the semi-darkness. The attentive young man immediately noticed several pairs of unfamiliar shoes on the floor. He walked boldly on and was greeted joyfully at the door. Meanwhile, a whole crowd of serious people was already waiting for him in the living room. The blond man in the jacket looked tiredly at the young man who entered. At that very second, the little frightened girl ran and hugged the guy tightly. The uninvited guest introduced himself as Prosecutor Park Chul-yong from the Seoul District Prosecutor's Office. So Do-jun remained sullenly silent, covering the trembling, frightened little girl with his body. The prosecutor announced the boy's arrest for assisting illegal loan sharking operations. The scene soon moved to the huge high-rise building of the city prosecutor's office. Seo Do-jun sat on a chair in the middle of the empty interrogation room. The young man looked menacingly ahead with his bright, golden eyes. Someone walked confidently down the corridor, reporting to the director on the progress of the investigation. Park Chul-young walked into the office, cheerfully discussing his daughter's studies abroad on the phone. The prosecutor flatteringly asked his interlocutor to convey his deep, sincere gratitude to the influential director Hong. In fact, Park Chul-young became a prosecutor only for personal gain. He chuckled nastily, promising to clean up the trash at any cost. With a loud, sharp thud, a thick folder of documents fell onto the table. Park Chul-young threateningly stated that the collected charges would last for 10 years. The prosecutor threw the paper at the guy, adding that Hwang Jong-seop had turned him in. So Do-jun listened to all these false, empty threats silently and coldly. The enraged man screamed furiously, trying to intimidate this calm, unflappable brat. Suddenly the guy calmly asked if Hong Hee-ju was involved. The prosecutor froze in confusion, completely not expecting to hear the name of this rich woman. Do-jun realized that Hwang Jong-seop's gang had been completely defeated. Park Chul-young took a sudden step forward towards the prisoner in a rage. The prosecutor viciously threatened the guy, promising to put him in complete disarray. And then the young man looked ominously at the man with a darkened, frightening face. The prosecutor recoiled in fear from this sudden, heavy gaze. He stuttered in confusion, completely losing his former confidence and composure. The man clenched his teeth in panic as cold sweat broke out. Park Chul-young swung his sword angrily, calling the boy an insolent little brat. Suddenly, someone knocked loudly on the door of the interrogation room. The officer on duty who entered politely called for Prosecutor Pak, demanding his urgent opinion. Suddenly, someone's loud and extremely surprised cry was heard from the corridor. The sergeant assumed the device was broken, but his subordinate assured him it was in good working order. He was genuinely puzzled why the scanner had shown him as an ordinary person. The assistant timidly suggested that the information about the boy's awakening was initially incorrect. Meanwhile, the sergeant understood that the data from a reliable source was infallible. Left alone, the boy sighed heavily in the middle of the gloomy interrogation room. He angrily thought about whether he should just destroy everything here. The young man seriously considered taking his loved ones and simply running away from here. Suddenly the door opened and a purple-haired girl entered and called out to him in bewilderment. She stared at the prisoner with her piercing, shining violet eyes. In response to her question, the guy indifferently admitted that he himself didn't know anything. The girl sternly asked him not to make hasty decisions and not to use force. The young man asked gloomily if she was trying to help him in this way. She replied that she simply could not turn a blind eye to the false accusation of an innocent person. And then a barely noticeable grin flashed across the guy's face. The guest added that the Hero Association would conduct an investigation into his recent actions in the rift. The interlocutor immediately became serious and sharply asked what was wrong with his family. The girl waved her hand indignantly, declaring that she was not obliged to keep an eye on his relatives. The guy gave her a heavy, frighteningly intense look. Realizing this, the guest visibly tensed up, and cold sweat appeared on her face. Noticing his anger, Hyun-ju-yeon hastened to reassure the boy about the safety of his loved ones. The guy visibly relaxed and sincerely thanked the girl, promising to repay the debt. Hyun-ju-yeon turned away shyly and quietly asked him to just hold on. The girl decided to act decisively, bypassing the standard channels in order to save Do-jun. She publicly exposed the bribery of Prosecutor Park Chul-yeon, completely clearing the guy. However, Do-jun still couldn't avoid being charged for operating without a license. Hyun-ju-yeon actively defended him, only getting the boy a suspended sentence. Suddenly, the car radio broadcast breaking news about an attack by a four-eyed praying mantis monster. Meanwhile, Do-jun calmly stated that this monster's name was Macassian. The companion stared at him in utter shock, since only the association knew the name. Earth scientists painstakingly analyze mana stones to obtain hidden data. Modern humanity deciphers this valuable information with the help of advanced technologies. Meanwhile, in the past fallen world, such information was obtained exclusively through magic. Thanks to this unique experience, Do-jun already had a thorough knowledge of most of the monsters. He calmly added that the creature could be easily defeated with red fire ant extract. The guy explained in detail that this poison, harmless to humans, paralyzes the enemy. The girl fell silent, stunned. Her lips pursed from the overwhelming feeling of complete confusion. Unable to bear it any longer, she asked him directly who Do-jun really was. The young man only remained mysteriously silent, staring coldly into the distance. The car suddenly took off, carrying the heroes towards new mysterious events. The girl's eyes widened in fear at the frightening ignorance of her strange companion, and then she finally got angry because of his complete, demonstrative disregard for her. But in fact, Dujong was currently worried about something completely different. He thought gloomily about the consequences of eliminating the annoying Hyunju Yeon. Meanwhile, some blonde bit her finger in rage until it hurt. The woman glared at the table, shaking with wild, uncontrollable anger. The bald subordinate in a formal suit stood guiltily frozen in front of his enraged boss. He cautiously reported that the situation had suddenly taken a turn for the worst. The blonde angrily muttered the name of the hated Hyunju Yeon through her teeth. The assistant just spread his hands in confusion, not understanding the reasons for their secret connection. The red-haired woman frantically bit her nails, not understanding the reason for her competitor's intervention. She jumped up abruptly, shouting furiously at her subordinate because of the absurd news. The assistant trembled in fear before the angry, imperious boss, shrouded in a sinister aura. The woman's eyes were bloodshot with a mad and all-consuming thirst for revenge. In a fit of rage, she slammed her fist on the table with all her might. Meanwhile, some arrogant man arrogantly demanded that the reward amount be doubled. The secretary standing in front of him timidly doubted the adequacy of such a huge request. The boss just shook his leg, confident in his absolute indispensability. A creepy grin played across his face in anticipation of the upcoming fight. The interlocutor tensely reminded him that Hyunju Yeon was a deadly opponent. The authoritative S-rank slammed his fist down on the wooden table with all his might. The unexpected blow made the secretary flinch in fear, and sweat ran down his face. The man loomed over him menacingly, noticing that he could easily crush his opponent. The assistant nodded quickly, his voice trembling, confirming his complete readiness to carry out the boss's orders. The boss immediately cooled down and asked with a smile about the Hero Association's decision. The secretary dejectedly reported the refusal to increase payments due to the state of emergency in the UK. Turning to the window, the frustrated leader angrily paced his luxurious office. Turning around, he angrily called the management bandits and clarified the exact dispatch time. The assistant told the boss about a joint transfer with the Japanese, which greatly pleased him. The man looked out into the street with anticipation, thinking about the new invincible monster Macassian. The villain laughed maniacally, anticipating the colossal increase in his influence after his victory. Suddenly, a terrible storm broke out over Cambridge, and lightning pierced the sky. The huge Macassian mercilessly destroyed the city streets, putting the civilians to flight. Local heroes with huge swords fearlessly lined up before the advancing giant monster. The brave blue-haired warrior prepared to deliver a lightning-fast, coordinated strike. The creature roared in fury, its eerie, brightly glowing eyes flashing. The strongest fighter made a powerful lunge, crushing the ground around the monster. His companions shouted furiously, trying with all their might to hold back the enemy's onslaught. But Macassian was incredibly fast and immediately counterattacked the confused defenders. The enraged monster leaped forward and delivered a powerful blow, destroying everything in its path. One of the defenders fell to the ground, coughing up blood from the terrible blow. Macassian swung his huge paw fiercely, intending to completely destroy the pathetic humans. The monster's huge blade crashed straight into the hexagonal tiles of the square. The wounded swordsman in the white cloak was breathing heavily, barely able to stay on his feet. The blue-haired warrior froze in shock, noticing something extremely strange. The silhouettes of several more huge four-legged creatures suddenly appeared from the fog. The girl's eyes widened in fear, realizing the hopelessness of their current situation. At that moment, another bolt of lightning cracked and split the spire of the ancient clock tower. The merciless monsters rapidly advanced into the depths of the European city, which was ablaze with flames. A vast army of Macassians stood ominously in the middle of the ruined streets, shrouded in thick smoke. The monster's eerie, gigantic eye gleamed ominously with a deathly yellow light. The huge creature continued to destroy the half-destroyed buildings with a furious roar. The creatures quickly filled the pavement, mercilessly sweeping away everything in their path. Meanwhile, a military helicopter hovered in the night sky above the city. The people inside screamed in shock, realizing the truth of the crazy rumors. The purple-haired girl enthusiastically confirmed that the secret remedy really does work. The gloomy man next to her was puzzled as to where she got such precise information. The commander resolutely ordered the detachment to immediately put an end to this chaos. The fighters, one after another, fearlessly fell down straight from the helicopter. The girl drew her blade in mid-flight, ready to smash the monsters to pieces. A huge passenger airliner began landing directly over the airport building. Meanwhile, a whole crowd of excited people had gathered in the terminal. Reporters with cameras at the ready rushed towards the exit. Journalists were buzzing with discussion about how Hyunju Yeon had definitely saved Great Britain. The man in glasses enthusiastically called the girl a true heroine of all England. And then the crowd roared with delight, noticing the appearance of the long-awaited star. Someone's elegant shoes confidently stepped over the threshold of the automatic doors of the terminal. Purple-haired Hyun Ju-yeon walked out to the press under the flashes of cameras. But the reporter's tricky questions only made the heroine fall silent in confusion. But Kang Yupyo smiled contentedly, listening to compliments about his exploits. The TV presenter announced live on air that a detachment of 200 people had returned. The screens explained in detail the tactics of hunting using a special extract. And the guy in the hoodie frowned as he watched the broadcast on the huge skyscraper. And then a barely noticeable bitter smile flashed across his face. Meanwhile, the TV was showing Kang Yupyo's satisfied face. The boy glared at the screen when he heard the name of this lying braggart. The action moved to a cozy city cafe, bathed in soft light. 3 stylish paper bags containing sparkling gifts suddenly appeared on the table. Seo Do-jun, sitting on the sofa, asked in surprise about these gifts. The girl explained that she had brought gifts for his grandmother, Yoon Young, and him personally. Seo Do-jun immediately began to look at the contents of the bags with interest. Inside was some kind of insanely expensive branded suit. The girl, smiling, called it a modest gesture of sincere gratitude. Seo Do-jun calmly noted that she had also helped him a lot. And then Hyun Ju-yeon seriously asked about Makassian's weakness, but the guy only remained mysteriously silent, causing his interlocutor to sigh with displeasure. Hyun Ju-yeon asked him about his specific plans for the near future. Meanwhile, she was determined to keep a tight rein on the situation around him. Seo Do-jun thought for a moment and opened his mouth to answer. And then he casually stated that he wanted to buy a house first. The interlocutor asked in surprise whether he was renting a place right now. And somewhere in a luxurious resort, loud crazy music was blaring. Half-naked beauties were having fun and playing ball by the pool. The big guy Kang Yu-pyo was relaxing in the warm water surrounded by girls. Suddenly he gloomily remembered the changed Hyun Ju-yeon. He clearly remembered that she knew the hidden weaknesses of monsters. The action moved back to the plane, where the heroine was relaxing in a mask. The man behind her suddenly started talking about her strange connection with Do-jun. The girl pulled off her mask, dryly retorting that Cheol-woo had brought it on himself. The interlocutor only grinned maliciously, speaking disdainfully about Cheol-woo's fate. The partner angrily reminded him that he now had a good reason to take harsh revenge. Hyun Ju-yeon just glared at him with her purple eyes. The man answered her with a cold, bone-piercing look from his scarlet eyes. The girl turned away indifferently, suggesting that he act at his own discretion. The fellow traveler was very surprised, suspecting that the two were not close at all. Hyun Ju-yeon put her mask back on, refusing to interfere in any way. And somewhere in a resort bar, a waiter carefully poured a cocktail into a glass. Kang Yu-pyo sipped his drink darkly, pondering Do-jun's hidden secrets. Meanwhile, the story has shifted to Lincolnshire, which has been devastated by a recent violent wave of monsters. The British Association quickly sent many powerful heroes into the huge Crimson Rift. The mustachioed guard regretted the absence of the valuable ant extract with annoyance. The partner agreed sadly, remembering the mountains of rare monastones he had missed out on. He stared at the sky, predicting the arrival of completely different, terrible monsters. And then one of the guards turned in surprise to the Crimson Rift. The man felt as if someone was slowly emerging through the ominous sparks of the portal. The second guard waved his hand lazily, telling his partner to quickly focus on the tedious work. Suddenly, an anomalous mana radiation erupted furiously from the depths of the rift. The mustachioed fighter froze in fear, covered in beads of cold, sticky sweat. The partner stared in horror at the horrific picture that opened up before them. A monstrous giant with a scarlet eye confidently stepped out from the blazing abyss. The stranger from the rift clenched his fist, covered in dark aura, furiously. And then the stunned sentry shouted to his partner to immediately contact headquarters. The mysterious enemy instantly activated a bright green glow around itself. At that very moment, both guards helplessly soared high into the air. They twitched desperately, completely unable to understand the reasons for the devilry that was happening. One of the hovering fighters suddenly drew his sharp weapon. He furiously threw several blades straight at the enemy standing below. However, all the knives bounced off the powerful magic shield with a ringing sound. The alien with scars on his face contemptuously called the attackers pathetic scum. And then he delivered a sharp, crushing blow with his heavy hand. An invisible crushing force instantly crushed both guards, causing them to scream hysterically. The attacker slowly extended his bony hand forward, shrouded in a dark purple haze. Furious lightning bolts erupted from his long, sharp claws with a dry crack. At that very second, a digital gauge appeared in front of him, showing a value of 19%. The alien with glowing eyes lamented with displeasure that in 10 years he had not even reached 20. He walked slowly past the fallen bodies, disappointed by the weak concentration of Earth's mana. The wounded guard on the floor, with his last strength, hoarsely asked who he was. Suddenly, a cruel, chilling grin flashed across the face of the sinister monster. The merciless enemy swung his hand sharply, causing a bloody massacre on the spot. And then he cold-bloodedly decided to get rid of all the pathetic bugs as quickly as possible. The action suddenly shifted to the quiet South Korean town of Paju, surrounded by dense forests. In the middle of an endless green field, a guy with a duffel bag was walking slowly. The lonely traveler trudged forward sullenly, completely immersed in his heavy thoughts. Suddenly he froze and listened warily to the strange noise. Seo Dojun turned around quickly, sensing the approach of an invisible and dangerous threat. At that very second, giant carnivorous worms burst out from under the ground with a roar. A trio of huge monsters instantly surrounded the defenseless guy from all sides. Seo Dojun calmly looked straight into the bottomless mouth of the writhing monster. He noted with cold blood that there were 26 more creatures lurking within a 100-meter radius. Then a mad grin flashed across his face and a furious flame burst into flames in his hand. A stream of blinding energy instantly incinerated one of the underground worms. All that remained of the monster on the green grass was a deep, scorched mark. And then powerful fiery explosions, one after another, shook the field. The remaining monsters were mercilessly torn to pieces by the crushing magic. Seo Dojun stood calmly amidst the charred remains of his fallen enemies. A satisfied and extremely confident grin appeared on his face again. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to an office skyscraper towering over the city. A gray-haired man with a mug in his hand asked the guy's opinion. The bespectacled interlocutor discontentedly called Dojun a very quarrelsome young man. Deputy Director of the Korean Association Min Hong-gi recalled his bold words. The man in the vest remembered that the scanner had not detected the mysterious guy's strength. Park Sung-chul was furiously outraged by the insolence of the good-for-nothing boy who ignored the association's questions. Suddenly, the gray-haired boss raised his finger, abruptly interrupting everyone else's indignation. Meanwhile, he asked the secretary in glasses if he had any other important information. The secretary reported that Seo Do-jun linked the incident to Kang Cheol-woo's evil plan. The guy woke up right during the deadly conquest of the gate, where he almost died. Then Seo Do-jun took revenge on the enemy and cleared the rift single-handedly. The feat looked provocative, but allowed the leadership to draw quite clear conclusions. And then the secretary read out a report on the outstanding abilities of this daring newcomer. The boss mentally compared the obstinate boy to a magnificent but wild stallion. It turned out that the verification procedure was allowed to be skipped in the presence of an influential guarantor from the association. The secretary clarified that the guy mentioned the name of the strongest S-rank heroine, Hyunju Yeon. And then the gray-haired boss's eyes widened in shock at the unexpected news. Meanwhile, Park Sung-chul also froze in deep shock from what he heard. And so Dojun himself only grinned confidently, remembering his daring trick. He clutched a brand new Gold Hunter's license tightly in his hand. Having an S-rank card, the 8th in Korea, opened any door for him. Now he could calmly clear the rifts as much as he wanted. Suddenly, the boss burst into loud laughter throughout the entire office, having assessed the scale of the situation. The management then discussed the incredible determination of this energetic young man. Park Sung-chul jumped up, amazed by the newbie's solo raid into a second-tier rift. The gray-haired chairman narrowed his eyes intently, considering the boy's reckless and dangerous act. Meanwhile, the deputy director, wearing glasses, listened tensely and silently to his colleagues' shouts. And then the vice chairman stopped short in fear, noticing his boss's heavy gaze. However, he then proposed to immediately promote the surviving Seo Do-jun in rank. The secretary objected, reminding him of the need to first obtain the hero's personal permission. Park Sung-chul persistently asked the boss if the new S rank wouldn't give people hope. The chairman silently placed his muscular hands on the edge of the desk. But in fact, he decided to meet this impudent young man in person. Meanwhile, in the rift, Seo Do-jun crushed the giant worm with a powerful blow. The huge mouths of the monsters suddenly surrounded the guy from all sides. However, Seo Do-jun remained completely calm in the face of danger. Suddenly, his hand instantly burst into flame with a bright, furious flame. The young man delivered a crushing circular strike, mercilessly burning the creatures to pieces. The next moment he landed gracefully right on the green grass. A powerful blast wave and smoke enveloped the defeated underground monsters. Soon the hero confidently stood on top of the defeated giant worm. And then the guy exhaled heavily, extinguishing the remaining fire in his palm. Meanwhile, he noted with annoyance the colossal expenditure of his mana. As a result, Seo Do-jun firmly decided to quickly acquire a good weapon. Against the backdrop of a clear sky, a modern building of a futuristic complex towered. Nearby, there was a forge with a sign decorated with swords and shields. Inside, the blacksmith was lazily scrolling through his phone feed right behind the counter. The doorbell suddenly rang, breaking the silence of the half-empty room. A guy with a huge bag on his back appeared on the threshold. He dropped the load with a bang, demanding that it be made into a weapon. The blacksmith immediately refused, citing the lack of prior reservation. The client objected, recalling a recent telephone conversation. The irritated master rudely sent the insolent guest to the other artisans. Suddenly, the angry visitor grabbed his t-shirt with a death grip. The stranger roughly grabbed the guy by the collar, demanding that he call the shop owner. The guest sternly ordered that his father be brought, since he had come here solely on recommendation. The guy stepped back in confusion, clearly not expecting such a strong onslaught. The frightened son hurried to loudly call his father from the workshop to the client. From the depths of the shop came the heavy, confident steps of the master hidden behind the screen. A tired blacksmith, Choi Chul Kwang, appeared in the doorway, dissatisfied with the guest's visit. The brunette calmly called out Hyunju Yeon's name, causing everyone to freeze. The old master's eyes widened in surprise, sweating from intense shock. The impudent son also froze in place, staring at the guy in a daze. The tense blacksmith asked again if Ju Yeon had really recommended this place. The boy clutched two strange bone fragments tightly in his hand. The blacksmith stared in amazement at the unusual material the boy had brought. The blacksmith's son asked his astonished father in surprise what it was. The elderly master immediately recognized them as the rare fangs of a giant salmo. The client confidently demanded that the longest possible sword be forged from these fangs. But the blacksmith objected, because non-metallic materials lose strength when drawn. The old man asked menacingly whether the boy was hinting at his incompetence. However, the customer brazenly insisted on his own, demanding that they simply be sold off. In addition, he carelessly asked to increase the weapon's mana capacity to the maximum. The master's son was completely enraged by such impudent doubts about his father's skills. The customer simply remained cold-bloodedly silent, looking contemptuously at the enraged guy. Then he calmly pulled the blacksmith's finished sword from his belt. The client dismissed the weapon as a level 5 knockoff. Suddenly, he grabbed the other man's blade tightly with both hands. The next moment, the sword in his palms suddenly began to shine brightly. The blacksmith stared in amazement at the devilry unfolding before them. The guy suddenly applied force, starting to squeeze the strong metal with his fingers, and then the steel blade shattered into pieces with a loud crack. The fragments of the weapon fell with a dry ringing sound right onto the floor of the forge. The customer sternly added that with such rubbish it was time for the master to retire. Having made a cheeky remark, the guy turned around and calmly left the shocked masters. Meanwhile, the action moved to a dense, dark, and wild jungle. Suddenly, a terrible, guttural, and frightening growl was heard from the forest thicket. Some ferocious monster bared its huge, toothy mouth in anger. The next moment, his single blood-red eye flashed furiously and angrily. A huge, green-skinned cyclops in spiked armor menacingly straightened up to his full height. The monster roared furiously throughout the forest, preparing to tear the intruder apart. And towards him, the same hooded swordsman was slowly walking across the water. The guy raised his hand in cold blood, enveloping his fingers in a bright, destructive flame. Suddenly he rushed forward, dealing the monster a powerful, crushing blow. But the giant deftly dodged, and the guy's fist only cut through the air. Maneuvering in mid-jump, the swordsman swung his burning hand again. The deadly attack passed within centimeters of the monster's frightened face. The enraged Cyclops roared furiously at the enemy's dangerous proximity. The next moment, the monster tore the tree out of the ground with a powerful grip. A huge log fell with force straight at the dodging guy, and then the swordsman quickly came up behind the stunned enemy. However, the giant reacted in time and turned sharply towards the attacker. The guy did another somersault, dodging the monster's massive fist. Suddenly, the entire area was illuminated by an eerie, poisonous, and bright green glow. The monster suddenly released a powerful green aura, increasing its strength. However, the boy deftly jumped onto the giant's back, holding out his burning palm. The swordsman delivered a swift and merciless blow straight to the enemy's body. The huge cyclops instantly turned into a blazing living torch. The monster howled piercingly from the burning pain, opening its mouth. And then his massive body exploded from within with a roar. A powerful blast wave instantly tore the huge giant to shreds. The swordsman landed skillfully on his feet after this jaw-dropping move. The headless carcass of the ferocious monster fell heavily to the ground. Sighing heavily, the boy wearily noted the difficulty of holding the mana blade for a long time. The guy carefully put the jar filled with blood into his backpack. The swordsman recalled with a smile how he obtained this valuable trophy. It was thanks to this liquid that he was able to easily defeat the Cyclops. Meanwhile, night fell, and the boy returned to the forge. He confidently placed the jar of red essence on the table. The blacksmith's son stared in amazement at the strange vessel the boy had brought. The client ordered that the father be given a liquid to easily fuse the fangs. And then the swordsman turned around, leaving the surprised blacksmith behind him. Later, the guy thought about finding the rarest artifact for mana capacity. The swordsman remembered that the thing he needed was in a secret place. The purple-haired girl in sunglasses answered the unexpected phone call with irritation. She asked her interlocutor about Brazil in surprise, standing at the edge of the pool. And all around, people were relaxing carefree, enjoying the warm, sunny day at the resort. Meanwhile, her green-haired friend calmly sipped a cool drink from a glass. A friend explained that the Brazilian government and the association decided to close the fault zone. She added that the monsters there are violent, but they drop excellent stones. The green-haired girl insistently called her to come with her, telling her to take her boyfriend with her. A friend reminded me of rumors that that guy had already become an 8th S rank. And then she cheerfully hugged the embarrassed girl, remembering their hunt together. Unable to withstand the pressure, the purple-haired girl reluctantly agreed, but immediately set forth her tough condition. The girl doubted whether her mysterious boyfriend would even agree to go with them. And then the old blacksmith stood stunned and frozen in the middle of his workshop, amazed. The welding process of the rare fangs went perfectly thanks to the Cyclops' blood that was brought. Meanwhile, the customer returned and politely crossed his arms over his chest. The old man agreed to forge a long two-handed sword weighing about 5 kilograms. Suddenly, the master mentally acknowledged that the guy was not an ordinary boor at all. The old man carefully examined the blank, reflecting on the high importance of this weapon. The blacksmith warned that the work would take a month to reach the 7th level of mana absorption. The guy narrowed his eyes menacingly, doubting the sufficient power of such a future blade. And then he was finally convinced of the need to obtain that secret artifact. The guy left, promising to work on the mana later and bring the necessary materials. The blacksmith was completely shocked by the words of the mysterious guest. The swordsman walked alone through the night streets of the city with a huge shield. A few days later, the city was bathed in bright sunlight. A luxurious black car pulled up to the side of the road with a loud roar. The brunette touched the hood and promised to take good care of the expensive car. The purple-haired girl ironically noted that the car costs about 100 million. The guy just smiled warmly, adding that she was perfect for him. This answer immediately caused the companion to flush with a deep, embarrassed blush. Then she abruptly changed the subject, asking about the affairs with the Hero Association. The swordsman explained that he demanded a tidy sum for revealing his identity. Because of this, the negotiations reached a dead end, making the girl quite nervous. The guy slammed the door, leaving his companion alone with her thoughts. Soon she moved into the salon, turning away to the window in resentment. The girl buckled up and told about the dangerous fault zone in Brazil. The association planned to completely isolate the rift there from the rest of the world. Dojun turned to her in surprise and asked about her plans. The unexpected question made the girl's heart beat wildly. She hesitated, embarrassed, trying to hide the excitement that had washed over her. And then she timidly asked if she could go together. The girl's gaze was filled with trepidation and intense embarrassment. At the same time, the other woman looked tense and angry. The man in the suit mockingly asked how much more she wanted. He noted that he had already received a huge advance of 30 billion. The woman was furious, considering that hiring this man was her mistake. The mercenary replied sarcastically that no one else would take on the job. He added that there are plenty of killers around if you pay them well. The man revealed the secret by calling Seo Do-jun the 8th S rank in Korea. The woman slammed the table, indignantly not believing such information. The mercenary was about to leave, advising them to wait until Do-jun finished them off. Director Hong asked fearfully if Seo Do-jun was really an S rank. She screamed that she would pay more if only the mercenary would do something. The man grinned, noting that money alone was not enough in such a matter. He turned around, inviting the woman to become close business partners in the future. Hong furiously demanded that everything be done to ensure that Do-jun died quickly. Suddenly, the smartphone in the mercenary's hand began to vibrate loudly and beep. Director Hong froze in anxious anticipation, staring at the cold-blooded killer. The man stared silently at the glowing screen of his mobile phone. He then said mysteriously that the heavens were clearly on Hong's side. A sinister smile appeared on his face at the news of the perfect chance. The huge passenger plane soared rapidly into the clear azure sky. The purple-haired girl sat thoughtfully in a comfortable business-class seat. A serious young man in a strict black suit sat nearby. Another strong passenger with short green hair was diligently squeezing an expander. Do-jun's companion continued to stare ahead silently, lost in thought. A man in a brown jacket with his arms crossed was also on this flight. Meanwhile, someone nearby was greedily gobbling up noodles straight from a cup. This hungry passenger in the hood turned out to be the imperturbable Do-jun himself. Meanwhile, the airliner continued its flight, cutting through the air currents. One of the fellow passengers was closely watching the flying guy. The evil squint of a green eye promised someone very big trouble. The purple-haired girl remained icy calm no matter what. The guy with fiery eyes grinned slyly, clearly planning something. The look from under the hood was full of grim determination and hidden threat. And outside the plane window, the endless Amazon jungle stretched out as we approached Brazil. They finally arrived in São Paulo. This huge metropolis greeted them with sunshine. A tense atmosphere of anticipation reigned at the headquarters of the Brazilian Heroes Association. The secretary excitedly reported the imminent arrival of the Korean expeditionary team. The head of the association only chuckled ironically, noting the impatience of this nation. However, his aide expressed serious concerns about their level of awareness. The head ordered to control the situation at all costs. Left alone with his thoughts, he sighed heavily and resignedly. The main secret was that the strongest national hero was killed, and it wasn't a monster who did this, but a mysterious, frightening man. The leader frantically wondered what had happened at the ominous Santarém fault. Meanwhile, the speaker at the briefing began showing a map of problem areas. The purple-haired girl sitting in the hall was excitedly searching for someone on her phone, and then she realized that the guy had gone to Santarém alone, and from the stage they continued to explain the plan for the further distribution of the arriving heroes. At this time, Brazilian flags were flying outside the majestic bomb hotel. Without wasting any time, the purple-haired girl jumped into a taxi. Suddenly, someone's powerful hand blocked her path, slamming the door. Her companion sternly asked her where she was going before the official schedule was published. She only briefly said that she urgently needed to go to Santarém. The yellow car took off abruptly, leaving the guy on the sidewalk. He just looked after them in bewilderment, remembering the prohibitions of the Brazilian Association. Meanwhile, the ominous fault zone near Santarém looked dead. A whole group of Korean heroes led by Seo Do-jun had already arrived there. The girl indignantly asked on the move where they were rushing to which Do-jun ironically remarked that she was the one who was late. The girl irritably demanded to know why they had dragged themselves into this wilderness. The detached guy calmly explained that he was interested in a certain blue croco. She was taken aback by this answer and reminded him that she was actually older than him. The short-haired companion who was watching them only silently made fun of their argument. Do-jung harshly cut off her indignation, advising her to continue to remain polite. At this time, the fighters walking behind openly doubted the safety of the adventure. One of them dismissively called the guy an ordinary greenhorn. The experienced swordsman only grinned condescendingly and ominously in response. He then turned around and called Do-jun the most legendary rookie. And the couple in front continued to argue furiously, completely ignoring the others. The companion excitedly asked Do-jun about his intention to close this rift. The guy calmly retorted that he only planned to collect valuable materials here. Suddenly, from the darkness, the huge claws of an unknown monster slashed furiously. A monstrous blow of crushing force hit the defensive shield directly. The red-haired warrior loudly ordered the confused squad to immediately take up positions. One of the fighters groaned heavily, struggling to contain the furious onslaught. A terrible creature appeared before them, proving to be far more terrifying than any expectations. The mercenaries left behind were completely at a loss at the sight of such a deadly danger. Meanwhile, Do-jun calmly ordered the frightened fighters to move out of the way, and the boy resolutely drew his trusty, shining blade for battle. The guy pompously armed himself with a huge sword, ready for a protracted confrontation. The blacksmith warned that obtaining the monster's heart would be extremely difficult. The hunter resolutely intercepted the blade, aiming for a quick and precise attack. A powerful targeted blow shook the entire area with a roar. The hero dodged with lightning speed, letting the splashes of someone else's blood pass by. The creepy blue monster glared at him with its yellow eyes. The huge monster rushed forward with a roar, crushing everything in its path. The observer shouted joyfully because he had believed in this success from the very beginning. The comrades froze in shock, not believing their eyes at the madness they saw. The witnesses of the battle finally realized how insanely and incomprehensibly strong this swordsman was. The hunter stood calmly among the chopped-up remains of the defeated monster. Later, the tired group made camp around a bright night fire. The companions were enthusiastically discussing how the swordsman had skillfully defeated the blue crocodile. The girl added in a whisper that he had just as easily finished off Cocastrian. And then everyone finally realized what an unusual hero this guy was. At that moment, strange blue meat was sizzling appetizingly in a hot frying pan. The blue-haired ally sternly inquired about the results of the blue crocodile heart sorting. The swordsman calmly pointed to the containers, confirming the work had been completed. The girl sincerely wondered to herself why he needed these hearts at all. Looking at the dinner, she noticed suspiciously that it didn't look like beef at all. The hunter confidently stated that the blue crocodile meat was completely edible. The companion grimaced in disgust, wondering why anyone would eat this when there was an abundance of normal food. The guy shrugged indifferently and suggested that she simply not eat. Meanwhile, he began to devour the exotic dish with gusto. The guy handed a roasted piece of blue tenderloin to the girl sitting next to him, looking frightened. She screamed in panic, doubting the safety of this suspicious meal. And then someone's hand resolutely reached for the brazier with chopsticks. Ju-yun grabbed the tasty morsel, surprising her friend with her actions. The purple-haired warrior calmly explained her actions by saying that the swordsman had called the food edible. The short-haired companion froze in shock, astonished by such unexpected and blind culinary trust. The girl resolutely put a piece of mysterious blue meat into her mouth. And then she was amazed to realize that the meat turned out to be very tasty. Meanwhile, a new interesting conversation was brewing around the night fire. The short-haired companion sat down conspiratorially next to the swordsman, trying to find out his secret. In a whisper, she asked the guy about his relationship with Ju-yun. The companion was eager to know what secret approach the swordsman had found to his friend. However, the hunter only continued to chew silently, ignoring the stranger's curiosity. Memories of the beautiful Lady Maisel Grain came to mind. Then he remembered the young lady Ravenda Lashley from his past. Finally, he remembered Veronica, the last refuge in the fallen world. The companion, in a panic, asked him if he even heard her about the secret. The guy just silently and indifferently turned his head in her direction. With a grin, he said that honey doesn't look for bees itself. The girl froze in complete stupor from his impudent answer. And then she finally got mad, because it was impossible to imagine a poor answer. The companion kicked the poor fellow furiously while the swordsman coughed smoke by the fire. Meanwhile, the narrative suddenly shifted to sun-drenched São Paulo. In the luxurious office, the man announced that the report was over. The boss was puzzled as to why they had gone forward for a free dinner. The man muttered, "So do Jun's name" in a dark voice and remembered the purple magnolia. The subordinate reported that there were no particularly important monsters in Sanarema. And then the boss's mobile phone rang loudly on his desk. The man answered Director Hong with a nonchalant air, inquiring about the reason for the late call. The person on the other end of the line asked anxiously if something had happened. The director said that the father wanted to bring back Zhang, who had received an S rank. Suddenly, the boss irritably stated that the time for stupid jokes was over. Then he walked over to a map of South America hanging on the wall. The man grinned maliciously, declaring that Seo Do-jun would not return. This harsh answer clearly pleased the wily boss. At the end of the conversation, he calmly ordered the secretary to urgently contact Takashi. The boss finally slyly remarked that Zhang had gotten himself into this wilderness. Meanwhile, the detachment slowly moved through the dense thickets of the dangerous jungle. The guild leader warned about the monsters she had spotted, and the guy asked what kind they were. A girl with a gloomy face voiced the frightening name of the dangerous creatures, the lynxes. Zhang calmly stated that this powerful creature had also arrived here. Then he turned confidently and walked resolutely straight into the thicket. The lilac-haired girl just sighed, because she had known this answer from the start. Suddenly she called out to him and held out some small thing. The protagonist stared at the strange, clutched object with obvious bewilderment. She explained that these were earplugs because the roar of the lynx completely paralyzes the mind. The guy calmly said that there was no need for these things. The companion excitedly shouted after him that one shouldn't so stupidly underestimate the lynx. However, Zhang ignored her words and continued to walk away into the darkness. Suddenly, the night silence of the jungle was pierced by an eerie and piercing otherworldly howl. The entire squad froze in fear, instantly sensing the approach of a deadly wild creature. From above, a huge dark figure of a dangerous predator watched them closely. Against the backdrop of the full moon, a terrible wolf with glowing red eyes appeared. The girls were terrified when a powerful sound wave hit their ears. The guild's mercenaries were stunned by this paralyzing, monstrous roar. The short-haired companions screamed in panic for absolutely everyone to cover their ears. The main character just looked straight up, calmly and concentratedly. Ignoring the screams, Zhang continued to watch the monster, and the giant predatory wolf above howled with new crushing force. The lilac-haired girl clutched her head tightly with her hands with the last of her strength. The scarred partner and the swordsman were also languishing from the unbearable pressure, but the guy's face remained absolutely unperturbed and even relaxed. The girl was genuinely surprised that he didn't cover his ears at all. Instead of panicking, Zhang calmly bent down and picked up a stone from the ground. And then his hand was instantly enveloped in a powerful and bright flame. With a sharp whistle, he furiously launched the projectile straight upward. The fiery projectile whistled and flew straight towards the wolf sitting on the branch. The girls watched in shock as a bright flash suddenly tore through the darkness of the night. The wounded monster fell from the tree with a crash straight to the ground. Zhang calmly prepared for close combat, gripping his weapon tighter. The companion muttered in shock that the creepy lynx had suddenly stopped howling. The partners immediately rushed forward, following their fearless leader. Suddenly, several more bloodthirsty glowing predators jumped out of the darkness. The huge leader of the pack growled viciously, baring his razor-sharp fangs. His bloodshot, furious eye, in close-up, expressed a wild thirst for revenge. The purple-haired girl suddenly got into a fighting stance, ready to defend herself. The lilac-haired companion flinched in fear at the boy's sudden approach, and the leader's eerie gaze was already hypnotizing her. Zhang abruptly covered her wide-open eyes with his palm. He calmly explained to the stunned girl that the problem had nothing to do with the roar. The swordsman added gloomily that it was precisely this eerie gaze that paralyzed their minds. Then the guy confidently ordered his companion to simply close her eyes for a minute. The boy slowly pulled the hilt of his sword, preparing for a swift attack. And then he activated a devastating sword style called Bandayan. The guy used the first form, preparing to perform a real combat miracle. His blade, engulfed in furious flames, cut through the night air with a roar. The giant blade, engulfed in flames, rushed straight towards its target. The bloodthirsty lynxes on the branches watched in shock as the boy approached furiously. The next moment, a blinding fiery explosion shook the night jungle. The partners were panicking and wondering what kind of terrible technique this was. The protagonist's eyes flared furiously with pure magical energy. He quickly unleashed a powerful wave of fire on the pack of wolves. All living things around were instantly engulfed in a colossal, furious flame. The frightened predator tried to catch a glimpse of his killer at the last moment. Zhang's flaming blade was reflected right into the creature's bloodshot eye. A deadly fiery strike tore the leader's silhouette into tiny pieces. The fiery blade tore through space, leaving a bright trail in the air. The boy and girl froze in fighting stances, preparing to attack the enemy. The girl's eyes widened in horror and a drop of sweat rolled down her face. A giant flaming sword plunged into the ground, causing a powerful earthquake. The bloodied blue wolf lay motionless on its side, defeated in battle. Another wolf, crouching on the ground, watched the figures in the distance with fear. The guy's shocked companions looked in horror at the place where the sword fell. One of the girls, trembling with fear, whispered that it was simply impossible. The wounded animal, staggering, slowly retreated into the depths of the dark forest. In the ensuing silence, the confident steps of someone's heavy army boots were heard. Meanwhile, the guy walked calmly with swords past the frightened beast. Suddenly, the wolf's only remaining eye flared with a crimson flame. And then the guy, with a swift swing, mercilessly dealt the monster a fatal blow. The mortally wounded beast howled shrilly, spraying blood in all directions. Mentally calling the defeated enemy a non-entity, the guy looked into his eyes with indifference. He then touched the other person's eye with his palm, declaring that he was taking it. And then the guy calmly walked forward, leading the stunned squad. The green-haired companion looked at the hero's back with sincere admiration and a smile. The purple-haired warrior also smiled, clearly acknowledging the incredible strength of her leader. Behind them, people were whispering that it was simply impossible to believe in such an inhuman level of strength. The fighters wondered if the swordsman had surpassed Alphonse Chabris himself in strength. Someone even compared his power to the greatest hero, Cain Lester. Meanwhile, terrifying monsters began to silently rise from the gloomy reservoir. Creatures with empty eye sockets and sharp claws filled everything around. The companions merely noted ironically that these zombies had no brains at all. Suddenly, the bloodthirsty undead rushed into a swift attack with a furious roar. But the guy met the enemy with cold blood, powerfully punching him in the jaw. And then he jumped and delivered a crushing kick from top to bottom. A sinister amber gleam of a true predator flashed in his eyes. The hero's precise blows shattered the zombies' bodies into pieces. The severed head of the last zombie rolled across the ground with a dull sound. The guy stepped with disgust on the fallen remains of the creature with his heavy boot. The remaining soldiers of the detachment froze in shock, amazed by the sight they saw. In the ensuing silence of the night, only echoes of the recent fierce battle could be heard. And then the squad calmly continued on its way through the dark jungle. The purple-haired companion suddenly inquired about her leader's unusual swordsmanship. The girl also asked where he had studied these strange red flashes. And then the boy remembered the silhouette of his mysterious blonde teacher. In response, he ironically asked if the warrior really wanted to learn this. The swordsman mentally reasoned that in such a peaceful world she would not need it. The purple-haired warrior was indignant because she, an S-rank heroine, was brazenly ignored. Duzhong only remained calmly silent in response to her tirade. The girl glared at the guy, clearly expecting some kind of reaction. Then she turned away in resentment, lamenting such blatant mockery. The green-haired commander announced that it was time for the squad to finally leave the rift. The whole group walked together towards the giant purple exit portal. The leader was glad that thanks to Dojun, the rift was cleared without losses. Meanwhile, she planned to close the anomaly faster next time. A heavy army boot confidently stepped through the sparkling veil of the portal. Suddenly, on the way out, the green-haired girl heard someone's bold threat in Japanese. The impudent stranger rudely asked how they dared to disturb him. The green-haired commander's frightened companions immediately recognized this menacing voice. Duzhong instantly shielded the purple-haired warrior, assessing the sudden threat. Rema Takashi, a former Yakuza and head of the Teikoku Guild, appeared before them. It turned out that the bandit was going to have some fun with Ju Yan and told the guy to get lost. Reima Takashi angrily ordered Dojun to leave, threatening him with swift reprisals. The villain added sarcastically that the guy's comrades clearly didn't think highly of him. The shocked warrior asked in fear if Dojun really understood Japanese. The protagonist grinned coolly, replying that he understood other people's speech more or less. The enraged bandit was enveloped in a sinister aura, irritably asking what this freak was muttering. The boss's henchmen furiously demanded that the guy immediately get on his knees. Dujong only grimly snapped at them to quickly disappear away. The former Yakuza loomed over the boy, clutching his giant cleaver. Meanwhile, the green-haired warrior remembered the high rank of the Japanese guild. She stepped forward decisively, calling on both sides to resolve the conflict peacefully. However, the bandit rudely insulted the girl, telling her to stay out of his way. The Korean fighters instantly became enraged by such a brazen insult to their leader. But the commander sharply ordered her men to remain silent, holding back the brewing carnage. Introducing herself as the head of Purple Magnolia, John In-ju once again proposed a compromise. The bandit smirked contemptuously, declaring that this was the first time he had heard of such a small guild. The leader grinned slyly, suggesting that she join the general queue. Suddenly, the Yakuza unceremoniously grabbed the purple-haired warrior by her thin wrist. Dujong reacted instantly, his gaze darkening dangerously with rage. And then the guy, with a lightning-fast, crushing backhand blow, knocked down the insolent enemy. The villain only managed to promise that he would deal with the impudent youth a little later. The swordsman realized with cold blood that a planned provocation was unfolding before him. Dujun's expression changed and he suddenly rushed forward, breaking the distance. The shocked Yakuza didn't even have time to properly react to this movement. The guy's powerful kick sent the huge bandit flying high into the air. The shocked henchmen watched their boss fall with wide eyes. He ordered everyone to back off, calling his future actions self-defense. And then the guy suggested that the small fry run up and fight like men. The huge muscular fighter menacingly ordered those around him to quickly disperse. His powerful body was instantly enveloped in an ominous and frightening crimson aura. The big guy growled furiously, preparing to tear his impudent opponent to pieces. The purple-haired girl excitedly called out Du Jun's name. Suddenly she quietly asked the guy just not to kill his rival. The bandits in black shirts froze in shock at the unexpected turn of events. Meanwhile, the frightened allies also held their breath in complete shock. Then Do Jun unleashed a devastating kick from above with lightning speed. A powerful hook drove the opponent's face deep into the broken stone floor. The brute, thrown back by the furious impact, fell onto his back with a crash. The surrounding bandits were dumbfounded and wondered where this guy got so much toughness from. But in fact, they were told something completely different about Do Jun. The hero's gaze, radiating incredible danger, made everyone instantly fall silent. The defeated big guy realized in horror that he would simply die here. With a wild cry, the attacker rushed away from the battlefield in panic. But the guy instantly appeared right in front of him, stopping any attempt to escape. And then Dujong asked directly at whose request he had come into this situation. However, the winner calmly added that he himself could easily guess who the customer was. He unceremoniously grabbed the fugitive by the hair, holding him firmly in place. The guy cold-bloodedly denied any excuses, giving his attacker resounding slaps. Dujong swung his huge fist forward for a decisive and crushing blow. A fierce hook pierced the enemy's defense, breaking the opponent's bones. Witnesses of the brutal massacre stared in fear at the scene unfolding before them. The defeated big guy fell unconscious to the ground at the feet of the winner. The short-haired girl admitted in shock that the fight was too unequal. Then the enraged guy began to mercilessly trample the fallen head into the floor. The frightened ally excitedly suggested to Ju Yan to quickly stop this madness. Suddenly, the purple-haired girl screamed at Dujong to stop, otherwise the beaten man would definitely die. Dujong gloomily said that he would answer for everything himself. But the enraged companion demanded that he stop doing stupid things in order to avoid responsibility. Meanwhile, the battered big guy was barely breathing, surrounded by his frightened accomplices. Suddenly, the guy rudely interrupted the girl, not wanting to listen to moralizing. The short-haired friend furiously ordered the bandits to answer loudly, clearly, and get out. The three surviving enemies instantly fell to their knees, shrieking in agreement with the demands. But Dojun only sneered contemptuously, not believing their cheap bow. The protagonist sternly demanded that each of them bury their foreheads in the ground. The criminals, in a panic, began to frantically bang their heads against the cold stone floor. And finally, the guy mockingly reminded the Yakuza of their old tradition of cutting off fingers for mistakes. The attackers, in panic, begged for forgiveness in the face of an invincible enemy. Dujong ordered the leader to repeat after him the words of sincere humiliation. The blue-haired mafioso gritted his teeth and apologized, bitterly regretting what he had done. Meanwhile, the allies behind him giggled sarcastically and contentedly. The thug, beaten half to death, only quietly cursed, unable to get up. Dujong stood calmly surrounded by girls, in complete control of the situation. Meanwhile, the plot suddenly shifted to the distant Brazilian city of São Paulo. The stern boss in the leather chair stared in shock at the documents he had received. His gaze instantly widened in extreme surprise and hidden anxiety. Two girls we already knew stood at attention in front of the puzzled man. The boss asked incredulously if they really wanted him to believe what he heard. After all, the news of the severe beating of S-Rank Takashi by one person shocked everyone. The girls immediately explained that they were hoping for joint work between Korea and Japan. The boss closed his eyes wearily from the piled-up problems and the weight of the accepted report. He dryly retorted that the Brazilian Association had nothing to do with it. The man added that the guest will hear the final verdict from other agencies. He then asked if they had encountered anything unusual in the rift. The head of the association also asked why Do-jun was still not around. The friends hesitantly replied that the guy needed to finish some business. Meanwhile, these very matters led Do-jun straight to the city hospital. The bandaged wounded man only froze in fear, confusedly muttering something unintelligible in response. Suddenly, a gloomy brunette with a bouquet of festive flowers appeared in front of him. The stranger threateningly ordered me to lie still, calling it an official hospital visit. A strange mechanical artifact in the form of an eye suddenly materialized in the guy's hand. The device instantly flared up and directed an ominous beam directly at the patient's face. The order was given to tell the whole truth, and the wounded man's pupils blazed with a hypnotic fire. In the silence of the room, the guy silently hovered over his completely subdued victim. And then the poor fellow began to wail through his teeth, lamenting his own worthlessness. Shaking with horror, he admitted that he had caused serious problems for the Korean Guild. The dark-haired guest only stared at him, absorbing every word. As he left, the boy only listened to the wounded man's heart-rending cries about the insignificance of the Yakuza. The visitor walked down the corridor while the patient continued to frantically curse the mafia. Meanwhile, in the office, they were discussing the incredible explosive popularity of Seo Do-jun. The bespectacled interlocutor asked whether the Japanese had really closed their investigation. The elderly man confirmed that the victim, Takashi, had asked for this himself. He frowned, adding that Japan was clearly trying to avoid hidden problems. The bespectacled man in a formal suit cautiously clarified what kind of troubles were meant. The gray-haired boss grinned ominously, admitting that he himself didn't know yet. But he is confident that Jong will soon destroy the usual order of this world. Meanwhile, there was only one day left before the start of a large-scale operation in Brazil. The Korean heroes arrived early and immediately began to carefully study the area. They soon met up with their foreign colleagues who were heading to the gym. Those gathered excitedly shared detailed individual plans for a joint operation. On the eve of the fight, many went to freshen up in the shower to get into fighting spirit. The main star of the evening gathering was undoubtedly the charismatic Seo Do-jun. The party guests immediately surrounded him, enthusiastically engaging in small talk. The ladies present were whispering loudly that rumors of Takashi's defeat had spread everywhere. The purple-haired girl silently listened to her friend's admiration for the guy's modesty and coolness. The woman in yellow suggested that they looked ordinary against his background. However, her friend was deep in thought, completely ignoring the other person's words. The yellow-eyed companion asked in surprise what had made her friend withdraw. Meanwhile, a charming stranger swam up to Jong with a glass. The guy turned politely to the beauty who had approached him, beaming with a Hollywood smile. It turned out to be Gloria Tyler, recognized as the most beautiful heroine in America. Here, the friend unceremoniously gave the purple-haired girl a powerful and encouraging slap. She furiously commanded him to stop being depressed and move forward immediately. Disturbed by the noise, Jong suddenly turned around at their strange voice. The girl in the purple dress timidly froze under his gaze. Her cheeks instantly turned a bright crimson blush from embarrassment. Noticing her reaction, the guy only grinned condescendingly and softly. The red-haired beauty said a sweet goodbye to Castle, promising to definitely meet again. The purple-haired companion asked, puzzled, who this Castle was. And then the girl asked him directly if he really had a foreign name. The guy calmly replied that he used it before becoming Do-jun. Meanwhile, she remembered with confusion that the investigation had revealed nothing of the sort. The purple-haired girl snorted angrily because the guy had never told her about this before, and at that moment they were being closely watched from the side. The large man angrily called Takashi an idiot who couldn't even bury such a boy. The menacing stranger finished his drink, deciding that now he would have to intervene himself. Some sensitive ears suddenly picked up a warning for Mr. Do-jun to be careful, and then Do-jun felt someone else's gaze and turned around abruptly. The voice continued to warn that strong opponents do not always play fair. The purple-haired girl added that Takashi definitely has close and dangerous allies. But the guy just waved it off, calling these cowardly guys a trivial problem. Suddenly, a frighteningly confident and daring grin appeared on his face. Du Zhong defiantly confirmed that they did not bother him at all. The enemy was taken aback by such impudence and shuddered with fear throughout his entire body. The man glared at him, his face flushed with rage. And the main character just snorted mockingly, noticing this pathetic reaction. The stranger clenched his fists in rage, watching his confident opponent walk away. The enraged enemy mentally swore that he would finish off the insolent man with his own hands. Meanwhile, deep night had fallen and a bright crescent moon appeared in the sky. The girl with the scar admitted in surprise that it was the first time she had seen such a sight. The entrance to the rift looked frighteningly dark, ominous, and sparkled with purple energy. The companion confidently stated that with two S-rank heroes there was nothing to worry about. She agreed with a smile, not foreseeing any problems ahead. The commander loudly commanded all the soldiers to immediately prepare for a dangerous entry. A group of armed men stood frozen at the fence in front of a huge pulsating portal. Suddenly, the purple-haired girl looked at her partner with puzzlement and anxiety. The frightened boy turned around excitedly, asking in confusion what exactly had gone wrong. And then the purple-haired partner anxiously asked if he really didn't feel anything. She turned to the girl with the scar in surprise, checking her feelings. The guy just remained tensely silent, swallowing with difficulty the lump that had risen in his throat. He suddenly realized that the concentration of mana around him had increased rapidly and dangerously. Meanwhile, a crushing, overwhelming, and terrible force emanated from the dark portal. On the smartphone screen, the numbers 23.61% were ominously frozen in a clawed hand. The insidious monster growled contentedly that there was very little left to reach the coveted 30%. Having called people pathetic bugs, the monster maliciously wished them a quick rest. The hunters suddenly bent over, gasping for breath as gravity surged and became unbearably heavy. The guy with the sword realized that the quality of mana here was incomparably denser than in previous places. The purple-haired girl noted with alarm the unprecedented tension in Mr. Dojun's eyes. She realized with horror that something sinister was definitely happening here. Du Zhong himself only silently broke out in a cold sweat from a bad premonition. From the darkness of the night forest came a loud command for everyone to remain calm. The commander warned the squad that the rift anomaly had made their bodies heavier. He then ordered Ju Yan and Dojun to defend the formation. The swordswoman calmly agreed, considering it the safest solution at the moment. The guy in the cloak reminded them that their main task was to close the rift. The fighters instantly and harmoniously saluted the boss, prepared for the worst, and the whole group resolutely moved straight towards the ominous purple distortion. Around the same time, Zhang entered the Santarém rift. An international team was sent to close a rift in northern Brazil. Suddenly, in the darkness of the night, desperate cries of wounded soldiers were heard. Someone's huge transparent wings fluttered ominously in the sky. Killer bees descended upon the people, mercilessly piercing the unfortunate with their stings. The warrior realized with horror that even a C rank should be able to handle this easily. Another ally was thrown to the side with a roar from a powerful blow, and then the unfortunate man collapsed dead right onto the bloody grass. The remaining fighters screamed in panic that the A ranks were being slaughtered like children, and the monster with burning eyes bloodthirstily aimed at a new victim. The guy swung his fist furiously, preparing to deliver a powerful, crushing blow. However, he felt with horror how his body suddenly became heavier. The warrior, driven mad by fear, rushed to run away from the terrible creatures. Meanwhile, the monsters continued to mercilessly drive the surviving people into a trap. And in the Santarém rift, Zhang spectacularly cut the enemy with a giant dark blade. Ferocious black orcs arrogantly emerged from the forest thicket to meet him. Zhang's companion was genuinely surprised by the sudden increase in strength of these dangerous monsters. At that very moment, the brave swordsman attacked the monster with a furious cry. He delivered a swift and precise blow straight to the orc's head, but the wounded monster only stared at him ominously with its burning eyes. The enraged monster gripped the huge glowing battle axe tightly in his hand. A huge black orc moved menacingly straight towards the confused guy. The purple-haired girl instantly rushed forward and pulled the swordsman back in time. The rescued soldier thanked her, but she ordered him not to climb recklessly. And then the brave warrior rushed headlong into battle alone. She jumped up nimbly, fearlessly approaching the huge monster from behind. The ferocious orc spun around, swinging his heavy axe with all his might. The purple-haired girl calmly dodged the enemy's deadly blow, and then she delivered a devastating flying kick. The black orc roared in rage at the warrior's unexpected and powerful attack. The enraged orc brought his massive fist down with all his might. Suddenly, the fearless warrior soared high into the night sky, and then she quickly fell straight on the monster's head. Meanwhile, the wounded giant furiously swung his heavy blade, but the girl with a deft blow cut the monster's jaw until it bled. The black orc froze, shocked by the incredible speed and power of the attack, and the warrior gracefully jumped to the side, breaking the dangerous distance. The surrounding space was suddenly torn apart by a powerful flash of pure energy. The menacing monster staggered heavily, choking on its own dark blood. The onlooking fighters recalled with admiration the true and terrifying power of the S ranks. The blue giant roared deafeningly, spreading a powerful aura of fear around it. The guy in the hoodie delivered a crushing blow to the monster's jaw. With a powerful kick, he slammed the creature's head straight into the ground. The scarred girl became nervous, realizing the difficulty of closing this rift. The fallen monster lay motionless, dark smoke flowing from its mouth. The hunters noticed a strange, barely noticeable black shimmer on the creature's body. Taking a closer look at the dead body, Kang Tae-jun was puzzled as to what it was. And then the guy realized, because of this filth, the monsters became stronger. Suddenly, a powerful stream of dark mana erupted from the corpse. Seeing this, the rest of the hunters fell into a complete stupor of shock. The tension was mounting, and the scarred girl peered ahead with alarm. The leader of the hunter squad also had difficulty containing the overwhelming excitement. Meanwhile, the entire group froze around the defeated blue giant. Suddenly, suspicious, sharp sounds were heard from the night thicket of the jungle. From there, a huge, shapeless, slimy creature jumped out with a wild roar. The sword-wielding hunter reacted instantly and launched a furious attack. But this monster swelled monstrously, swallowing everything around itself. The guy barely managed to dodge the monster's powerful counterblow. A swordsman in a blue suit immediately came to the rescue. But in reality, this huge living slime only grew larger. The fighters were shocked by the increased power of the swamp ghouls. The monster suddenly attacked, causing the boy in the blue uniform to scream. The swordsman quickly dodged, doing a sharp backward somersault in midair. The shield-bearer lamented that enemy attacks easily pierced his durable armor suit. The situation has completely gotten out of the hunter's control. A huge fanged mouth appeared right behind the stunned warrior. At this critical moment, the scarred girl rushed into battle with fury. The creature let out a shrill scream from the crushing blow of the hunter squad. With one powerful swing of her huge blade, she cut the monster in half. The girl realized that this anomalous rift was fraught with mortal danger. The girl with the scar suddenly came to a terrifying and frightening conclusion. She suggested that a similar anomaly was now occurring in all the faults of the world. Meanwhile, in the fault near Manaus, the situation was rapidly becoming critical. The strongest vanguard hunters were already lying there, completely dead and defeated. Even the famous Brazilian fighter Arvado and the experienced Frenchman David died. But in reality, it was only a couple of Belkers who destroyed them. The leader of the hunter squad asked in a panic about these monsters. Suddenly, the guy in the hoodie tore another slimy creature apart with a powerful blow. He coldly confirmed that Belkera with dark mana was incredibly dangerous. The girl remembered the black aura of the orcs, which now strengthened the swamp ghouls. Suddenly, a powerful magical whirlwind swirled right in front of the shocked girl. The hunters were perplexed because their bodies were filled with highly concentrated dark mana. Meanwhile, the purple-haired warrior furiously rushed into the very center of the storm. She angrily shouted that the mana from the games actually exists in reality. Suddenly, the monster's huge mouth opened nearby with a wild roar. Kang Tae-jun fell down rapidly, ready to deliver a crushing blow. In reality, the Earth remained a world without the usual concept of mana. The boy thought gloomily that their home was still too peaceful. However, the hunter understood that this fragile peace would definitely not last long. His gaze instantly hardened, directed straight at the attacking monsters. The darkness thickened, enveloping the fist preparing for a crushing blow. The energy instantly concentrated, turning the boy's swing into pure power. The guy brought down a crushing fist with all his might. Landing hard, the hunter cold-bloodedly tore the slimy creature to pieces. The blast wave of mana effectively dispersed throughout the dark area. The other hunters froze in fear, watching in amazement at his inhuman strength. The purple-haired girl compared the monsters enhanced by dark mana to reckless athletes on doping. And then she asked Tae-jun in surprise how he knew this. Due to the emerging mortal threat, the group noticeably slowed its progress along the rift. Suddenly, the girl walking in front sharply commanded the squad to stop. The girl with the scar pointed out to Mr. Do-jun the Belkera cocoons she had found. In these creepy sticky nets hung the bodies of monsters, shrouded in cobwebs. Do-jong calmly ordered the entire squad to be on alert due to the enemy's proximity. But the purple-haired companion objected in confusion, not seeing any obvious signs of the monster. Suddenly, the hunter warned that the main danger was actually already here. The companions were very surprised to suddenly discover that the boy also had rare magical abilities. Meanwhile, Do-jun quickly activated his destructive fire magic. A fiery flash with a colossal roar exploded the suspended cocoons of the creatures. The guy explained that Belkera uses captive monsters as obedient puppets. Now all that was left for the hunters to do was quickly finish off the lonely Belkera herself. The hunters fell silent in shock. trying to comprehend the incredible strength of their comrade. The girl with the scar thought in amazement that this guy was becoming more and more impressive. Meanwhile, the wounded shield-bearer mentally acknowledged Do-jun's superiority over humans. Suddenly, the purple-haired companion came closer and asked him to be honest. She asked directly whether the hunter was already living his second life. Hearing this, the guy only smiled mysteriously and condescendingly in response. The majestic image of a knight from the past immediately appeared in his thoughts. Then Do-jun calmly inquired about the distance to the very core of the rift. The companion confidently promised to close this dangerous anomalous zone today. The leader of the hunter squad looked at the guy's face with excitement and intently. The wounded guild members wearily admitted that they had completely exhausted themselves in the swamp. Du-jong listened gloomily to their complaints about unbearable physical exhaustion. The hunter dryly told them to rest, promising to deal with Belkera alone. Suddenly the guy took off, instantly gaining incredible speed. He rushed like a whirlwind into the depths of the dark corridor of the rift, leaving everyone behind. The girl with the scar was stunned and wondered where he got so much energy from. Meanwhile, the hunter was breaking through the dense night jungle at full speed. His eye, glowing with a furious fire, concentratedly sought out the hidden main target. Blurred silhouettes of gloomy trees whistled past the guy. And then, in the middle of a giant web, he finally discovered a huge black spider. Du-jong fixed his cold amber gaze on the monster. He mentally confirmed that the huge spider had finally been caught. With a powerful jerk, the guy soared high into the air with his sword. Without wasting a second, the hunter delivered a swift and precise vertical strike. The monster loomed menacingly above, spreading its many sharp paws. The creature hissed furiously, completely blocking the passage with its strong web. But Do-jun instantly dodged, flying past the dangerous sticky nets. His swift blade flashed through the air, blindingly cutting through the darkness. The hunter landed gracefully as the monster plummeted right behind him. The spider's huge body fell to the ground with a crushing crash. Du-jong sighed heavily, trying to catch his breath completely after the fight. Thanks to his refined mana absorption technique, the hunter did not feel tired at all. Soon, he walked calmly and measuredly back to his group. The purple-haired warrior still couldn't believe his solo victory. The guild leader was amazed to note that the guy didn't even look tired. Du-jong calmly stated that there were no other monsters nearby and allowed them to rest. The entire exhausted team of hunters finally made a long-awaited stop by the fire. But in fact, juicy meat was already sizzling appetizingly over the bright flame. Sitting by the fire, Do-jun suddenly felt someone's gaze on him. One of the girls timidly asked if she could try the meat too. The girl with the tail extended her hand and gratefully took the juicy roast meat. Her companion asked in surprise why she suddenly decided to try it. Then he suggested that they sit down, since they had nothing to lose anyway. The boy began to chew furiously, while the others watched from the side in fear. The swordsman watching them thought that this ordinary meat would only fill the stomach. However, he admitted to himself that he liked goal-oriented and desperate people. The young man extended his hand, deciding to give the boys this small, useful gift. And then the bodies of the poor fellows gobbling up the food were suddenly enveloped in a bright golden glow. The girl screamed with delight, feeling a powerful wave of energy run through her body. Watching their sincere joy, the swordsman smiled contentedly and understandingly. Mr. Do-jun pointed his finger at the core of the rift on the map. However, his companion reasonably noted that today everyone had already reached their limit. The blue-haired girl also honestly admitted that the monsters had become suspiciously stronger. Meanwhile, Do-jun remembered his original plan to drag out time. The guy really wanted to stock up on as many rare blue crocodile hearts as possible. But the appearance of the mysterious dark mana instantly destroyed all his calculations. Then the swordsman decisively unfastened the thick leather bag on his shoulder. Sparkling red magic stones fell onto the grass with a loud ringing sound. The blue-haired warrior froze in complete, silent shock at the sight of the wealth. The second girl stared at the stones in fear, not believing her own eyes. Leaving the girls alone with the pile of stones, the swordsman walked away in cold blood. Finally, he said that he would quickly close the rift and catch up with them. Suddenly, a terrible monster emerged from the darkness, its toothy mouth gaping. But the guy reacted instantly, making a swift dash forward to attack. Du-jun deftly dodged and went behind the creature with a smile. The swordsman's eye flashed menacingly with gold, fixating on the enemy's vulnerable spot. He swung and delivered a crushing circular blow with his huge blade. The sharp blade sank deep into the yielding body with a vile, squelching sound. From the defeated monster, the guy confidently pulled out a pure, shining crimson crystal. Meanwhile, the surviving group of fighters silently continued on their way. The warrior walking behind anxiously asked if everything would be okay with Do-jun. The blue-haired companion confidently replied that he had more than enough strength left, but she still dejectedly admitted her strong concern for him. She was incredibly ashamed to even call herself S-rank next to him. She sincerely doubted that there was a fighter equal to him in the whole world. Meanwhile, Dujong had already soared into the air right above the orcs. With his swift blade, he decapitated the huge fanged monster from behind in a flash. The boy deftly turned around while falling, preparing for another furious attack. The sharp sword forcefully cut through the thick skin of the next giant enemy. However, right in front of him, new formidable giants with burning eyes appeared. A barely noticeable but extremely sinister grin flashed across his face. A huge heavy axe whistled as it crushed the ground, raising debris. At that very second, the guy calmly lit a furious flame on his palm. A powerful wave of fire rushed with a roar straight at the opponents. There was a deafening explosion, and the enemy monster was thrown to the side. Suddenly, someone's furious gaze flashed through the pitch darkness. Meanwhile, the defeated giant orcs stood frozen in front of the main character. The next moment, the warrior triumphantly clutched the bloody ruby in his hand. And in the camp, a creepy aura suddenly thickened over the arriving girls. And then one of the guys froze in fear, breathing heavily from the tension. The squad slowly walked forward, leaving behind the oppressive dark energy. The sharp blade splashed and pierced the flesh of the bloodthirsty monster. A powerful stream of black blood gushed from the monster's deep wound. The hunter confidently raised his sword to the sky, celebrating his victory. The guy turned around coolly, his gaze expressing complete indifference. Suddenly he squeezed someone else's still warm heart tightly in his hand. And then he carefully lowered the beating organ into a transparent jar. The boy silently lifted the vessel, sealing the grisly trophy inside. Meanwhile, a defeated, bleeding animal lay sprawled on the grass. Rubies fell from the body of the fallen creature onto the ground with a ringing sound. The hunter noted with satisfaction that each animal dropped a decent amount of crystals. Then he confidently threw the heavy backpack over his shoulder. Soon the boy slowly wandered into the depths of the dense green forest. Meanwhile, work was in full swing at the hero's Brazilian operations center. Suddenly, instruments throughout the headquarters began to beep alarmingly. The huge main screen showed an area called Santarem. The operators stared at the suddenly changing readings in confusion and fear. In the next second, the employees joyfully shouted that the rift was closed. However, the girl, shocked, reported to her boss about the strange call from the guild. The man in the suit frowned darkly, not understanding the chaos that was happening. A terrible two-headed giant with burning eyes suddenly appeared in front of the guy. But the hunter only calmly assessed the level of mana emanating from the monster. And then the giant swung his huge bandaged leg fiercely. The creature's huge fist crashed down right on that spot. The hunter noticed in time a glowing purple core right at the monster's foot. The guy quickly prepared to attack, deciding to end this as quickly as possible. The enraged two-headed orc with a wild roar rushed into a crushing attack. A close-up showed a giant shining blade raised to strike. The monster's heavy, hairy paw flew downwards at breakneck speed. The swordsman reacted instantly, his furious gaze fixating on the target. The swordsman quickly activated the second form of the Bandayan sword style. A furious blade of fire rumbled through the air around the enemy. The huge monster roared angrily, blinded by the bright flash of flame. The hunter rushed past at lightning speed, leaving a flaming trail behind him. And then the two-headed giant staggered heavily from the unexpected maneuver. The guy with a scary grin said that he had just begun. And then the warrior made a mad leap high above the ground. A sharp, glowing blade mercilessly cut through the giant's powerful chest. The wounded monster howled in pain as dark blood spurted out. But the swordsman had already risen up again for another crushing blow. The guy muttered through his teeth that he would end it all right now. Blinding cross-shaped strokes of furious blades flew in all directions. The wave of fire easily cut the century-old thick tree in half. A powerful explosive cross smashed the surrounding rocks and trees into pieces. And then the monster stared in horror at the approaching inevitable death. The gigantic carcass of the two-headed orc fell dead on its back. The swordsman looked down with a cold face at the giant he had defeated. Without wasting any time, he mercilessly cut off the monster's huge, bandaged leg. The giant's second head screamed furiously from the wild, unbearable pain. Suddenly, the swordsman spun around at breakneck speed in the final whirlwind. The tension grew as the giant's silhouette was suddenly pierced by bright, restraining beams. There was a roar, and the warrior gripped his sword tighter, preparing to meet the danger. The danger had passed, causing the swordsman to breathe a sigh of relief and put away his weapon. Suddenly, an ominous and powerful purple whirlwind began to swirl right in the air. A stranger, shrouded in dark energy, emerged majestically from the opened portal. He immediately noticed that the concentration of dark mana remained unchanged throughout. And then the swordsman realized that this anomalous phenomenon had a culprit. Filling the rift with such a wild volume of energy required colossal forces. Only an undead lord or some kind of imperial lich could do something like that. Otherwise, most earthlings would have long ago turned into insane zombies. The swordsman narrowed his eyes menacingly, realizing the futility of simply closing the rift. The guy clenched his fist resolutely, ready to take further action. Suddenly, he swung his blade sharply straight into the purple stream. The energy vortex shattered into small pieces with a roar from the powerful impact. The guy was determined to personally sort everything out and investigate this incident. Meanwhile, an important meeting was in full swing at the headquarters of the Association of Brazilian Heroes. The secretary visibly trembled as he handed the terrifying report into his boss's hands. The manager angrily stated that the reports received looked completely unintelligible. On the one hand, only one hero survived from the entire United Squad. On the other hand, the unknown team returned in full force. The secretary added that alarming reports were also coming from other faults. The chief sighed heavily because only the strongest fighters were sent on each mission. It turned out that only the team led by Hyunju-yeon achieved real success. The chief was perplexed because the Koreans had closed the most difficult Sanarem fault without losses. However, his subordinate shocked him with the news that the anomaly had closed after their exit. This information literally made the boss's eyes pop out of his head. He immediately inquired about the current whereabouts of the mysterious heroine Hyunju-yeon. Upon learning of her imminent arrival, the enraged leader ordered that the girl be summoned immediately. Meanwhile, Hyunju-yeon and her guild were slowly making their way back. During this time, Do-jun managed to deal with the second rift. That very second fault was insidiously located right under deep water. The guy encouraged himself to move forward and walked boldly.